Yes.
On the full agenda, good afternoon. Welcome to the City Planning Special Meeting. And Madam Secretary, please begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. This is the City Planning Commission's special meeting held in Spector Hall, 22 Reade Street. Today is Monday, March 30th, 2015, and the time is 1:04. I will now call the roll. Chairman Weisbrot.
Here.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Here.
Commissioner Besser. Here. Commissioner Cantor. Here. Commissioner Cerullo.
Here.
Commissioner De La Uz.
Here.
Commissioner Dweck.
Here.
Commissioner Edie.
Here.
Commissioner Efron.
Here.
Commissioner Jung.
Here.
Commissioner Levin.
Here.
Commissioner Marin.
Here.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Here.
A quorum is present. Let's turn to page 1 of the calendar. Borough of Manhattan, calendar numbers 1 through 6 concerning Vanderbilt Carter and 1 Vanderbilt Avenue. CD5, calendar number 1, C140440MMM, calendar number 2, N150125ZRM, calendar number 3, C150128ZSM, calendar number 4, C150129ZSM, calendar number 5 has been withdrawn, and lastly, calendar number 6, C150130AZSM. For favorable reports on calendar numbers 1 and 3, and for favorable reports as modified on calendar numbers 2, 4, and 6. Chairman Weisbrot.
Good afternoon. I am really delighted to be voting today on our proposed Vanderbilt Carter rezoning and the application for 1 Vanderbilt as these applications advance one of the first commitments that Mayor de Blasio made, which was to revitalize East Midtown as a world-class 21st century commercial district, attract more quality jobs to New York City, and deliver vital infrastructure improvements. Landmarks would also have a greater opportunity to transfer their unused development rights under the proposal that is before us today. Our proposal creates a new special permit that would allow developments along the 5 Vanderbilt corridor blocks adjacent to Grand Central Terminal from 42nd to 47th Street to obtain increases in density in exchange for major improvements to the area's public realm. The improvements must be undertaken at the developer's risk and must be completed before any bonus space is occupied in order to assure that the public benefits are achieved. The proposal also enables area landmarks to transfer more of their unused development rights to potential receiving sites in the Vanderbilt corridor, as well as providing increased flexibility regarding the conditions by which the public could allow these development rights to be transferred. The special permit process provides an opportunity for the public to comment on the public benefit derived from the improvements proposed as part of each major development in this vital area immediately around Grand Central proceeds. All of these provisions in our proposal are responsive to issues raised by the community and elected officials during the previous East Midtown proposal in 2013. And in addition, modifications we make today to the text suggested by the Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer will provide the public with useful information with which to assess future proposals in the Vanderbilt corridor. The first application to use the new special permit and the modified landmark transfer is 1 Vanderbilt, which envisions a major new state-of-the-art sustainable office building at the corner of East 42nd Street and Vanderbilt Avenue that would provide a significant package of on-site and off-site transit and pedestrian improvements. The special permit provides that in exchange for the right to construct a 67-story commercial building containing offices and retail uses, the developer will include new indoor and outdoor public space adjacent to the terminal. Its package of improvements to the Grand Central 42nd Street subway station would not just benefit the surrounding area, but the functioning of the entire Lexington line, the busiest line in the subway system. All of these improvements must be completed before the bonus space may be occupied. The proposed building itself would be a significant addition to the East Midtown Business District and to our skyline. It would provide the first new office space in at least a decade in the area around Grand Central Terminal, helping further the city's goal of keeping East Midtown one of the best business addresses in the world. It would also be one of, if not the, most sustainable office buildings in the city. I'm also pleased to note that the Commission made modifications to the One Vanderbilt application, responsive to the Manhattan Borough President, that would improve the accessibility and amenity of the ground floor of the new building. Madam Secretary, before you call for votes, I also want to acknowledge Borough President Gail Brewer and City Council Member Dan Garodnick for their leadership on the community planning process for the greater Midtown, East Midtown area. This action that we're about to take today is really the first step in a broader effort to revitalize East Midtown, and I know that many New Yorkers are eagerly awaiting their draft recommendations, which will be coming in the coming months. Finally, I do want to acknowledge especially the hardworking city planning staff and divisions, some of whom are veterans of the previous proposal and have shepherded this important project to this important milestone and seem to have been working on this for at least 112 years. From the Manhattan office especially, I really want to commend the indomitable Edith Suchen and Frank Rishala, who is now the Deputy Director of our Zoning Division, and Ezra Moser, Anita Lermont and John Manchin from our Councils Division, from the Zoning Office, Frank Rishala again, the ubiquitous Frank Rishala, and Chris Hayner from our Environmental Division, Diane McCarthy and Bob Debruskin, from our Technical Review Division, Kenny Narain, Liz Lee, and Philip Montgomery, Eric Kober, from our HEIP Division, Daniel DeCerbo, and the head of our Urban Design Division, Jeff Shoemaker. And with that, Madam Secretary, I vote aye very enthusiastically for a job really well done by our staff in bringing it to this point. Thank you.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Well, I join the chairman's citing and kudos to the Manhattan office for their work. I, like other commissioners, was around for the first endeavor around East Midtown, so I know this has been a long haul. I don't have anything substantively to add what the chairman has said. This is a pivotal project, not only because of its physical magnitude, but because of the various amenities, starting with the public realm and the fact that the public realm amenities must be completed before the building's occupancy. I think this is a fitting segue and prelude to the much larger discussion, obviously, that's going to be had around East Midtown. I vote yes.
Commissioner Besser.
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor.
This is a Class A building in what has become, in many instances, a Class B neighborhood as far as the office buildings themselves have become obsolete. Their floor-to-floor heights are wrong, their column spacings are wrong, and this is a tremendous opportunity for us to start upgrading our stock on the East Midtown side. And I think it's an ingenious combination to have found a way to get infrastructure that we so desperately need here in the city and a way to pay for it. I'm delighted to vote yes.
Commissioner Cerullo.
Recused.
Commissioner De La Uz.
I just want to join with my fellow commissioners in congratulating the team here at City Planning. This is definitely a very exciting moment because of the important public amenities that this provides. Improves pedestrian experience. It obviously brings much-needed improvements to the public transit. There's a transit hall, obviously, that One Vanderbilt is contributing to the overall experience. And really, it's appropriate to be locating density near such an important transit infrastructure. So I'm happy to vote yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
I concur with all the comments of the commissioners, and I happily vote yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Likewise, I commend the staff and the hard work that's been done here, and I enthusiastically vote yes.
Commissioner Efron.
Thank you. While the improvements were obviously more than relevant to the specific criteria of the proposal, they also represent equity for the entire city in reduced commuter time, in better access to the transit hall and handicap access. And I also commend the entire staff and enthusiastically vote yes.
Commissioner Jung?
I echo those comments and say yes.
Commissioner Levin?
Me too, yes.
Commissioner Marin?
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz?
Yes.
Favorable reports have been adopted on calendar numbers 1 and 3, and favorable reports as modified have been adopted on calendar numbers 2, 4, and 6. Borough of Manhattan, calendar numbers 7 and 8. CD5, calendar number 7, C140404, ZSM, calendar number 8, C140405, ZSM, in the matter of applications for the grant of special permits concerning 39-41 West 23rd Street. For favorable reports on calendar numbers 7 and 8, Chairman Weisbrod.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Besser.
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor.
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner De La Uz.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Jung.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
I'm pleased that this project now includes a small element of affordable housing. That's a marked improvement to the project since the public review process started. I think there's some details to be understood that are beyond our frame of work here about how those affordable units will be developed and owned and managed and supervised and maintained as an asset for the city's affordable housing stock going forward, but that can all get figured out later or by others, and I'm pleased to vote yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Favorable reports have been adopted on calendar numbers 7 and 8. Calendar number 9, Borough of Brooklyn, CD 15, N150109ZRK, in the matter of an application for an amendment of the zoning resolution concerning the Cherry Hill Gourmet text amendment for a favorable report as modified on calendar number 9. Chairman Weisbrod.
I'd also like to make a few remarks regarding this application. The history at this particular site is somewhat complicated and murky. We heard much passionate testimony from the community on both sides of this issue. While we realize that Cherry Hill Gourmet Market opened without being in compliance with zoning, and note that the applicant may have been less than forthright with the Department of Buildings when securing its building permits at that time, virtually all the testimony we heard, as well as the site visits by staff, make it clear that Cherry Hill is a desirable, well-regarded use for the neighborhood and is compatible with the goals and character of the sub-district. So while I am disturbed by the way in which Cherry Hill's use came into being, our purview here is limited to determining appropriate land use regulation. And to quote from a previous approval some years ago by this commission, where the applicant also did not act with due regard for the zoning resolution, the commission is not a judicial body or trier of fact as such, and in deciding whether to grant a special permit, we make no determinations regarding the responsibility for the condition that require legalization. Rather, our role in reviewing a special permit is to determine whether the applicable findings are met. The Commission is frequently presented with applications which seeks to legalize conditions that do not comply with the zoning resolution. And in acting on such applications, we don't express a view regarding the appropriateness of prior conduct, and there certainly is, that is certainly an issue here, and we encourage enforcement agencies to take such action as is warranted. So in this particular instance, I vote to approve this very, very limited text amendment. I note that the amendment before us limits the Cherry Hill Market to its current size and does not permit it to expand as of right. If the owners or operators wish to expand in the future, they would have to come back for discretionary approval from this commission and the city council. I note that there are existing avenues in the zoning resolution for them to do so, and they should, if they wish to do so, I urge them to do so in a legal and appropriate way. I'd like to thank Councilman Chaim Deutsch and his office, Borough President Eric Adams, and the Community Board for their thoughtful approach to this issue, as well as the thoughts and views of my fellow commissioners who certainly spent a lot of time considering this very contentious application. And with that, I vote aye.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Well stated. I vote yes.
Commissioner Besser.
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor.
I think this is a classic exhibition of murkiness, as the chair referred to it, with regard to information and evidence. Although we are not a judicial body, sometimes the courts will say, you have the burden of proof isn't there. So with the burden of proof not being there, I will vote in favor of the applicant for the very reasons that the chair stated earlier.
Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner De La Uz.
Yes, and I just want to thank the public who came to testify. It was very important to hear directly from the folks that cared so deeply about their community.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Jong.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes, and I really appreciate the chair's framing of our decision here. You've summed up my thoughts as if you were reading my mind. Thank you.
Just let me say I had a lot of help on this from my fellow commissioner.
Commissioner Murray.
I too concur with the statements made by our chair. I also happen to have visited the site and do concur that a study should be done by the department of that neighborhood as a result of the changing demographics and the uses, which were predominantly restaurant uses. I do vote yes, but again, I encourage the department to take a look at that section of town again.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
A favorable report is modified has been adopted on calendar number 9. With your permission, Mr. Chairman, this would conclude the special meeting, and we can now advance to review
I will
session.
entertain a motion to adjourn the special meeting and turn to the review session. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all. I hear no one opposed.
The first item on our agenda, on our review session agenda, is a proposed text amendment regarding special regulations for neighborhood recovery to facilitate flood-resistant reconstruction in areas affected by Hurricane Sandy. We'll have 3 presenters of the department today. Cecilia Kushner, Nilas Klingel, who's making his very first presentation before the City Planning Commission, and Dakota Hendon, who unfortunately will be making his last presentation before the commission before he goes to the Department of Buildings.
Good building.
Maybe you can turn on the lights for a second. Actually read what I have to say. Thank you. Thank you very much. Before Cecilia starts, let me just say that today we are beginning the public review for our special regulations for neighborhood recovery. City Planning is the co-applicant on this application, along with the Mayor's Office of Housing Recovery and the Department of Housing Preservation and Development. These proposed zoning changes will speed up the process for owners of Sandy-damaged buildings to obtain building permits for elevation and reconstruction, and will reduce their vulnerability to future flood events, as well as protect property owners against higher flood insurance premiums. This responds to Mayor de Blasio's mandate to increase our resilience and epitomizes our commitment to streamlining government regulations to make them work better for the people we serve. I'd like to welcome Amy Peterson, who is the Director of the Housing Recovery Office, Rudy Giuliani, the HRO Director for Queens and Staten Island, not that Rudy Giuliani, different Rudy Giuliani. Leora Jontef, the Assistant Commissioner for Resiliency at HPD, and Deborah Morris, the Recovery Director at HPD. HRO, HPD, and City Planning have done extensive outreach to all community boards, borough presidents, council members in the affected areas of Staten Island, Queens, and Brooklyn. The amendments have received broad preliminary support, and therefore, in an effort to get homeowners on the path to resilience and recovery as soon as possible, we're recommending a 45-day referral to community boards, borough presidents, and the borough boards, just to bring relief as quickly as we can. And with that, I turn it over to our Deputy Director for Strategic Planning for Resilience, who has really done an outstanding job here, Cecilia Kushner.
Thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon, Commissioners. So the Office of Recovery Operations, HPD, and City Planning are happy to refer out today the special regulations for neighborhood recovery. This is a text amendment whose primary goal is really to accelerate recovery and resiliency in neighborhoods in Brooklyn, in Queens, and in Staten Island, where Hurricane Sandy has done a significant amount of damage, and we will expect thousands of properties to get rebuilt or elevated in the coming years. We've worked really closely with HRO and HPD to develop this proposal, but we've worked really closely as well with the Department of Building and the Board of Standards and Appeal to make sure that we were actually comprehensively looking at the question and resolving these issues. I'm just going to give a few slides of introduction and background on the recovery and resiliency efforts by the city, and then my colleagues in zoning, Niles and Dakota, will actually walk you through the specific provisions. So in the summer of 2013, the City of New York created the Build It Back program. The Build It Back program is funded by HUD with post-Sandy recovery dollars, and its primary goal is to financially assist property owners who have suffered damage during Hurricane Sandy and help them repair, elevate, or rebuild their home and being able for them to come back into their community. The program is managed both by HRO and HPD on the rebuilding side. As you can see from this map that was put together by DOB in a few weeks following Sandy, the vast majority of the damage incurred by Hurricane Sandy happened on the shore of Staten Island, in South Brooklyn, and in the Queens neighborhood around the Jamaica Bay. Because of the timing of the tide, the Bronx and Manhattan were mostly spared in terms of substantial damage. And so, not surprisingly, the vast majority of the registrants of the Build It Back program, and Build It Back has close to 20,000 people that are registered now, can be found in these neighborhoods in the free boroughs of Queens, Staten Island, and Brooklyn. We also have a significant number of people in these neighborhoods who are not registered with Build It Back, but who are contemplating making resilient investment on their own. And we see them operating with the same issues that we're trying to resolve here. So once someone is registered with the Build It Back program, they're given 5 different options, and these options are based on a damage assessments that Build It Back conducts. For property owners whose property incurred damage that is less than 50% of the assessed value of the building and the structure, these property owners are eligible for reimbursement and rehabilitation. So reimbursement of repairs they've already been doing since Sandy, and rehabilitation, so direct repairs that the Build It Back program do on the behalf of these homeowners. The vast majority of the registrant within Build It Back will only be eligible for these 2 options because damage was not very severe. For property owners whose damage is more than 50% of the value of their structure, they are eligible for elevation. Build It Back estimates that about 4,500 buildings can be expected to be elevated in the neighborhoods that I just showed you earlier. If a building has been so severely damaged that it cannot be elevated physically, or if the cost of the elevation is at or more than 80% of the cost in reconstruction, then a property owner is given the opportunity to get their home, the existing home demolished and entirely rebuilt. And HPD is taking care of the rebuilding portion of the Build It Back program. And HPD think that about up to 500 homes in the Build It Back program are expected to be completely rebuilt, in these neighborhoods. And finally, all property owners within the program that have been damaged at more than 50% of the assessed value of their home have the opportunity to be acquired by the city, and the city will then use these properties to be redeveloped in the neighborhoods in which they are. So in parallel to the recovery efforts, the city has made a significant number of regulatory changes to facilitate resiliency. The first one being the release of the Stronger, More Resilient New York in June of 2013 that really established a long-term resiliency framework for the entire city of New York. Our colleagues at the Department of Building have done significant changes, the first and most important one being the adoption of the FEMA preliminary flood insurance rating maps that contains the most updated risk profile and risk elevations for all the properties in the flood zone in New York City. The Department of Building also included freeboard, and freeboard is 2 feet for 1 to 4 family homes in New York City, as a reminder. And finally, the updated Appendix G, which contain all of the flood-resistant construction methods and standards for the city of New York. Here at the Department of City Planning, we've also done a significant amount of changes to remove all zoning barriers to resiliency. And we did this mainly through a citywide flood resilience text amendment that was adopted by the City Council in October of 2013. That text looked at broad brush at the type of properties and type of zoning regulation we have in our flood zone in New York City and tried to remove all impediments to resiliency. It was done as an emergency measure for the sake of time to accelerate recovery. So it includes a sunset provision. It will expire 1 year after the adoption of the federal flood map by the city. And so we will need to re-enter the public review process in 2016 to make these zoning changes permanent. And so they will come back in front of the commission a bit later. So again, our primary goal for the citywide flood resilience text amendment was really to allow property owners that have incurred damage during Sandy to be able to elevate. And that included provisions that allow all existing legally non-complying and non-conforming structure to elevate in place. At the time when we did the text, we did not contemplate that documenting these non-compliance and non-conformance was actually going to be a strong hindrance to the recovery process. However, and Nihilus will go into detail about this, this is where we are today, and we think the text amendment that we're proposing will actually be able to remove that last zoning barriers towards recovery and resiliency, and we're really excited to begin able to bring it to you. So, Nihilus?
Yes, so as Cecilia was mentioning, the flood text, which is currently in place and is utilized to the maximum extent possible by Build It Back when working in the flood zone, did not expect, when it was adopted in 2013, that buildings in the flood zone would be in compliance or conformance with the zoning regulations that are in effect in those areas. Rather, city planning anticipated that there would be a wide degree of noncompliance and nonconformance in these areas, and the flood text, as it was written in 2013, allowed for homeowners in these areas to elevate or rebuild their homes while maintaining these noncompliances and nonconformances. And just to be clear, for the record, when we're speaking about noncompliance, we're speaking about the height and setback, floor area, and required yards of a home, and noncompliances relates to a lot, would include lot width and lot area. And when we're speaking about nonconformance, particularly in this context, we're talking about 2 or 3 family homes in single-family districts, as well as stranded commercial uses in residential districts and stranded residential uses in manufacturing districts. But the use of these 2 terms expects that these noncompliances or nonconformances can be fully documented. That is, their history can show that they were built legally and that they were built prior to whatever zoning change disallowed them. That's very difficult to prove in these neighborhoods for 3 reasons. One is that the housing stock in these areas is very old, maybe older than some parts of the city. You can see here an image from the Library of Congress of a bungalow colony in the Rockaways in 1910, which is still in existence and inhabited year-round today. In addition, the zoning changes which have been put in place since 1961 set much stricter standards for the form of the neighborhood than you would typically find in these areas. And third is that documentation, whether by the city, by the homeowner, or by third parties such as the Sanborn Atlas Company is oftentimes inconsistent in these areas and very difficult for us to use in terms of determining what we would call noncompliance or nonconformance, but you may hear us refer to as legal noncompliance and nonconformance, just for clarity's sake. And just to give you an example, at a neighborhood-wide scale, this is an example of Broad Channel. You can see that between 1924 and 2012, very little in the built environment changed. Many of the homes are still in the exact same shape that they were at that time. And as a result, the zoning which has been put in place since 1961 has led to a high prevalence of lots which would have some form of noncompliance issue. And so homeowners going to the Department of Buildings in these areas would need to fully document the noncompliance or nonconformance of their building, the lot, or the use, and that creates a large problem when this gets multiplied to the neighborhood scale. Just to give you some specific examples from the Build It Back pipeline, this is a home in Garrettson Beach. The yellow highlighted corners of this home aren't found on any of the historic documentation that's available to the program. And when you look around the neighborhood, you see that that's not in keeping with the existing building character. That's not to say that this is necessarily a legal addition. It's just it's simply not documented. We don't have the documentation we need to explain the history of these additions. So what that means for Build It Back is that in order to elevate or reconstruct this home, these yellow shaded portions would need to be removed from the home in order to elevate it. This creates an added cost to the Build It Back program, and it creates a disincentive for the homeowner who may not want this to be done to their home to stay in the Build It Back program, and might result in this home not being made to flood-resistant construction standards. And we have some other examples, but you can see that generally, I mean, the spectrum here is that it could be a very small portion of the home which is causing this problem, or in other cases it could be a considerable portion of the homeowner's dwelling space. And then in addition, in the case of reconstructions, there's a problem that we are going to be addressing where if the home was washed away by the storm or needed to be demolished for safety reasons, there's no way to document what exactly the building footprint was on the date of Hurricane Sandy. And so the existing flood text provisions which allow reconstruction within that footprint aren't able to be taken advantage of in this situation. So this necessitates a new zoning envelope, which Dakota will explain in a few minutes. So keeping in mind all of the lessons that we've learned with Build It Back, we're proposing a text amendment with 3 primary goals. The first is to simplify the process for documenting these noncompliances and nonconformances. The second is to make zoning changes which will remove disincentives from homeowners that are enticing owners to leave the Build It Back program. And the third is to establish this new zoning envelope for reconstructions. So the provisions of this text amendment will apply only to homes which meet all 3 of these criteria. They have to be a residence that existed on the date of Hurricane Sandy, so this does not apply to empty lots, for instance. The home has to be located in a targeted area, which we've designated, and I'll explain in a minute. And the home has to be elevated or reconstructed to flood-resistant construction standards that are in the Appendix G of the New York City Building Code. The targeted areas were designated around areas that had a very high neighborhood scale concentration of damage from Hurricane Sandy, high prevalence of these substandard lots which you discussed, and contain a wide range of building types which would actually be able to take advantage of the provisions which we've described. That's primarily, in this case, detached single and 2-family homes. And in addition, to further focus this text amendment on recovery from Hurricane Sandy, it is time limited. The text will be in effect for 5 years, during which time homeowners can seek plan approval and building permits from the Department of Buildings. Upon the expiration of this text amendment after 5 years, homeowners will only have 2 additional years to reach substantial completion of their home before normal vesting rules in the zoning resolution come into force. And to go over the targeted areas, in Staten Island, we're primarily, the targeted areas are located on the east shore of Community Boards 2 and 3. We are not including, in order to align this text amendment's goals with the broader city goals, this text amendment will not apply in New York State Enhanced Buyout Program designated areas. This will be, the text will be applicable in Brooklyn, in Community Boards 13, in Seagate and Brighton Beach. The rest of the peninsula was not included because, based on the analysis the zoning division conducted, there was not a prevalence of the documentation issues which we've described. And in Queens, we'll be including most of the Rockaway Peninsula, with the exception of Breezy Point and Roxbury, which are special situations. They are co-op communities located on a single large zoning lot and have their own protocol for how they conduct resiliency work, and we don't want to interfere with that protocol. We'll be including Broad Channel, Howard, and Hamilton beaches, and to the very east of JFK, you can see a small neighborhood located in a manufacturing district called Meadowmere. So if you're located in one of these targeted areas and you've met the eligibility requirements, which we've gone over, Dakota will walk you through the process which will apply to you and the regulations which will apply to your property. Thanks.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. So in order to really facilitate and make this move a lot quicker than it's going right now, we've established a much simpler documentation process that will allow you to take advantage of the proposed rules. So when you go to the Department of Buildings, you will just need to provide an aerial photograph from 2012, which is available on our New York City website, and a tax bill. And the aerial photograph is to prove that you have a building on the site as of the date of the storm, and a tax bill from 2012, which is also available free and online, that shows that the building was used for residential use. And that really just gets you into the program and able to utilize the following proposed changes. The first difficult thing that a lot of property owners are running into is determining what exactly is your zoning lot. And this requires for you to determine what your zoning lot was at the time that your building was constructed. When you're talking about bungalow communities from the early 20s, this can be very difficult. So what we are proposing is that for the time being, for the reconstruction and elevation of these residences, that you will be able to utilize your tax lot, which is, everyone knows what their tax lot is. The maps are available online. They usually coincide with the property that you own. It is a much simpler way of moving forward for a lot of these property owners. It wouldn't supersede a previously formed zoning lot, but for the purposes of this amendment, you'll be able to utilize your tax lot. From there, the issues are a little bit different between elevations and reconstructions. The vast majority of the build-it-back pipeline is expected to be elevation, so the existing building will be excuse me, elevated in place. And then there's a smaller number of homes that have either been demolished already or are substantially damaged to the point where reconstruction is required. And that pipeline is a little bit smaller, expected to be under 500 homes. For vertical elevation, as I mentioned, these buildings are typically still standing and of relatively decent condition. So documenting the noncompliance is a little bit easier. Shown on this slide is just an illustration of a typical elevation of a slab-on-grade building. And so our proposal here, because the building is still existing, and one way of documenting the extent of these noncompliances is to actually take a survey of the building as it exists today. This would include any porches or stair structures that are attached to the building, and that survey will document what exists. And from there, you will be granted non-complying status from that survey and able to elevate all of the things that are documented in that survey. It's a relatively, seems like minor change, but this will address almost all of the issues that we're running into right now. It's about this documentation of what exactly exists. This will allow the building to take the lowest horizontal structural member and elevate it to the flood-resistant construction elevation. From there, with elevations, we've tried to go a little bit further and really remove any disincentive that a lot of these homeowners are running into with elevation. And one is where you have a building that actually uses their subgrade space as habitable space. So it could be a son's bedroom. It could, in some cases, can be an extra unit. And for a one-story building, one story in a basement, it really represents a large chunk of your house. So as you may know, with flood-resistant construction standards, you cannot have any below-grade space. So in essence, to elevate this home, you'd have to wipe out the entire basement and just elevate the first story. So we're proposing a small change that would allow actually that below-grade space to be elevated to the flood-resistant construction elevation, maintaining existing non-compliances, as long as the building doesn't exceed 25 feet overall above the flood-resistant construction elevation. And roughly, we have quite a bit of variation in what the flood-resistant construction elevation heights are. But in the worst-case scenario, we're looking at 10 to 12 feet. So the resulting building would be around 35 in the higher elevation areas. The vast majority of the city, Brooklyn and Queens, have lesser 5 to 8 feet elevations. Additionally, we have another issue, mostly in Broad Channel, which is there are current buildings built over water. The Appendix G does not allow you to rebuild buildings over water, and HUD funding is restricted for such use as well. So what we've done is propose a allowance for the building to be shifted landward on the same lot. So allowing the building in its current form, the same shape of a building, to be located forward or landward of the shoreline, and keeping in the exact footprint that it has now. So that's pretty much would hopefully solve a lot of the issues that we're running into on the elevation side. For reconstruction, the issues are a little bit different. As I mentioned, the building is typically no longer there, or it's been thrown off its foundation, which leaves the property owner about two different choices as to how to move forward. One is you can go with the footprint as documented in the documentation history, which, as we've discussed, is difficult, or you can build according to the as-of-right envelope. In 1961, the zoning resolution and even the subsequent amendments to make the contextual districts really based it on lots that are larger than what exists in a lot of these beachfront communities. So they don't meet minimum lot width and lot area requirements, and therefore the yard requirements and other requirements that are applied to the lot really result in a building that's both out of context with the existing neighborhood and quite unlivable on a 20-foot lot. You can get a 10-foot wide building. It barely meets building code standards, and you also, in order to utilize all your floor area, have to really go to the maximum height limit, which we don't think is the best route forward. So in the cases of reconstruction, we've actually proposed a modified zoning envelope that will hopefully result in a slightly wider and squatter building that will be better in keeping with the context. You can see the building on the left is the as-of-right current condition, and this would be the as-of-right condition moving forward. Currently, Housing Preservation and Development are going through the Board of Standards and Appeals for, I think, there's about 100 cases on the docket right now to get a building that results in this very form. So hopefully, not only will this speed recovery for the as-of-right properties, but also remove a lot of those properties from the Board of Standards and Appeals plate. In order to arrive at that modified zoning envelope, we proposed a couple changes to side and rear yards, less height and setback, or a lower height and setback than normally would be allowed for the district. Some modifications to front yards to allow flexibility in parking, and some design requirement flexibility. For these narrow lots, the design requirements that were part of the 2013 flood text are difficult to apply in these cases. Additionally, corner lots are an extra challenge. These neighborhoods typically have smaller width streets that are more often, and therefore end up with more corner lots than a typical New York City block. So this is actually a bigger situation than in a lot of areas, in which we thought 10 feet was pretty narrow. On a corner lot, you're really left with 5 feet for a building. Doesn't meet any building code, it's pretty much unbuildable. So this amendment would propose that you would be allowed to treat that as the corner lot as an interior lot. Just a little bit more details on the yard changes, which are probably the most fundamental to the proposal, which is side yards would keep an existing reduction that's permitted by the underlying zoning, but actually reduce the minimum from 5 foot on each side yard to 3 feet on each side yard, which is consistent with building code requirements that allow openings on that side of the home, as well as use. Once you get in within 3 feet, everything has to be non-combustible. So sort of aligning ourselves with those requirements in the building code. For rear yards, right now there's a reduction for shallow lots that kicks in at 70 feet. We are expanding that to 95 feet and reducing the amount that you can reduce the yard by. The resulting being, you can see here that the charts at each varying lot depth. So this will really create, as you can see on a 20 by 80 foot lot, what was a very narrow and shallow building to one that's much more livable. This is a 3D representation of what the resulting building would look like in the context of an elevated block. We think that, again, it's better keeping into the context of these existing neighborhoods. It better reflects the form that already exists there. And then moving on to non-conforming uses, two small changes. For two-family homes, a lot of these homes were built prior to 1938 when certificate of occupancies were given out. So if it was built as a two-family home, or it has been used as a two-family home since, it doesn't have the documentation to prove it in a lot of cases. With the idea of really wanting to get everyone back in these houses as they were prior to the storm, we're going to establish a Board of Standards and Appeals process that would allow a homeowner that doesn't have that documentation that their home was a two-family previously to submit other types of information, tax bills, utility bills, anything that the Board of Standards and Appeals could use to determine that on October 28, 2012, the day before the storm, that the home was used as a two-family, and therefore would then allow it to be elevated or reconstructed as a two-family residence in full compliance with all building code and construction code standards. Additionally, in manufacturing districts, the 2013 flood text did not allow the vertical elevation or reconstruction of residences in manufacturing districts, which was in line with typical non-conforming and non-complying rules in the zoning resolution. But we do have some areas that this has affected significantly, which is the Meadowmere section in Queens, which is a residential neighborhood that's been there for a while and does have a build-it-back registrant, as well as other property owners that are looking to elevate. And so in this amendment, we're proposing to allow those buildings to be elevated or reconstructed. And finally, as Niles mentioned, there's three main goals. One is to simplify the process, really speed this up as much as possible. We want to remove those disincentives that have stopped people from elevating or getting out of the program. And finally, just creating a bulk envelope for people to move forward quicker, not have to go through the Board of Standards and Appeals process, and result in a better, more resilient building form.
Thank you. Questions for the team? Ms. Efron. Put the lights back on.
This is terrific. I think implicit in the three is perhaps a fourth, which is reducing the cost for people who've already been victims. So toward that end, I just had a question. Besides the cost of a survey, are there any additional costs that you see a homeowner being subject to? And is there a streamlined BSA process, or can you sort of verify or quantify the BSA cost for lost documentation?
So there definitely wouldn't be any additional cost created by this amendment. Even the survey is required at time of building permit anyway, so there might be additional notices or notes on the survey that would be required in order to document all the non-compliances, but there wouldn't be any additional cost required by the amendment beyond what is typically required for the building permit.
Sure.
And what was your second question?
Just whether the BSA process was, whether there was a cost associated with it, particularly around the lack of documentation.
So we've been speeding up. We've been working really closely with BSA. Deborah, specifically from HPD, has been working really closely with them. We have really broken the process or sped the process up to a 3-month period, and those costs are covered by the program.
Terrific. Thank you. Excellent.
Ms. Deluz.
Just want to say that these are really important changes to try to facilitate the rebuilding and the resiliency in the neighborhoods. I know one of the things that is kind of beyond the scope of this provision, but it's really about the number of people out there who may have been so discouraged by the process thus far that they're not being counted, they're not in the build-it-back process, who could really benefit from these provisions. And I just hope that in referring this out, that we kind of use this opportunity to really try to outreach to the folks that are not only officially part of this process, but who can benefit from these changes. So thank you.
Any other questions? Ms. Ortiz.
Just a question for clarification. Does the property owner need to be the original property owner, or could that have passed transferred hands?
No,
a change in the city map and a text amendment applicable to the West Village Residences LSGD, or Large Scale General Development. Approval of the requested actions will allow for the open space being developed on a site within the LSGD to be mapped as a park and conveyed to the City of New York. The site's located in the West Village within Manhattan Community District 2. The West Village Residences LSGD special permit was approved by the Commission on March 28, 2012. The LSGD is located in the Greenwich Village Historic District in a predominantly residential area with ground floor retail uses along wide streets such as 7th Avenue and Greenwich Avenue. There's also a number of community facilities and institutions in the area, among which is the North Shore Long Island Jewish Health System, which is located in the O'Toole building just north of the large scale here. The LSGD includes two sites. There's the east site and the triangle site. And these sites constitute a portion of the former St. Vincent's Hospital Complex, which is no longer in operation. So the east site here is zoned R8 and C62. And it's bordered by West 12th Street to the north, West 11th Street to the south, 7th Avenue to the west, and interior lots to the east. It has a lot area of approximately 92,900 square feet, and it served as the main hospital complex, with 7 buildings being constructed from the early 1900s to the mid-1980s. The 2012 approvals allowed for the reuse and redevelopment of these buildings as a mixed-use, primarily residential development, and construction of that approved project is currently underway. The triangle site, which is here and here, is zoned C27, and it's bordered by West 12th Street to the north, 7th Avenue to the east, and Greenwich Avenue to the southwest. The site is 16,677 square feet, and 15,100 square feet of that serves as required open space for the residential development on the east site. So in conjunction with the original approval, the West Village Residences agreed to pursue 2 follow-up actions. The first was a modification to the 2012 approvals to allow for a memorial to the AIDS and HIV epidemic to be included on a portion of the triangle site. And the second was to complete a series of actions to allow for the open space to become a formal park and owned by the City of New York. So those first set of actions were approved by the Department of City Planning as chair certifications on September 2014 and January 2015. So these allowed for the public access area within the triangle parcel, which is shown, the design is shown here, again it's there, to include that AIDS memorial. And the AIDS memorial is in the western edge, and it will occupy about 1,500 square feet of the triangle site. So the proposed project would address the second commitment made by the West Village Residences to formally map the open space as a park and convey it to the city. The proposal would not change the design of the open space, nor change the design of the West Village Residences residential project in any way. So in order to facilitate the proposed project, the applicant seeks approval from the Commission of 2 actions. First is the park mapping of the 16,677 square foot triangle site, and that will include authority for acquisition of the site by the city. And second is a zoning text amendment that will allow for the open space requirement within the West Village Residences LSGD to be reduced by the size of the required open space provided by the triangle site. So, and this will take place only upon mapping of the triangle site as parkland and transferred to the city.
Questions for Joe? Mr. Cantor.
When we approved this thing a few years ago, wasn't there conversation regarding building something below grade as well?
There might have been conversation then, but that's not moving forward.
Ortiz.
So whose responsibility will it be to maintain the park once it has been transferred?
It will still be the West Village residences.
Okay.
There's a maintenance and operations agreement that will
Sorry.
be.
Any other questions? Not certified.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Let's now advance to item number 3, page 32. It's a proposed special permit and City Planning Commission certification to facilitate an expansion to the Hospital for Special Surgery. Our presenter is Stephen from the Manhattan office. We're on item number 3, page 32.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This is an application by the Hospital for Special Surgery for a special permit pursuant to zoning resolution section 74682, development over streets, to allow for an increase in the permitted lot coverage on HSS's main campus by 2,820 square feet, and for an approval by the City Planning Commission under the 1973 agreement between the City of New York, HSS, New York Presbyterian Hospital, and Rockefeller University to allow for development in the demapped airspace over the former East 70th Street. These actions will allow for the addition to the HSS's West Wing building located at 535 East 70th Street to be enlarged by 7,930 square feet of floor area, plus mechanical space. So as you can see on the far map there, HSS is located in Manhattan's Upper East Side with its main hospital buildings located here. That's the West Wing, that's the East Wing. And this little area here is the proposed addition. This is between York Avenue and FDR Drive, in between the former East 70th Street and East 70th Street within the coastal zone boundary. This is on the northern edge of a medical and educational site, larger site. Some people call it Eds and Meds. As you can see in the map, different areas here. Like I said, the Hospital for Special Surgeries in blue, New York Presbyterian, Weill Cornell Medical Center is the yellow, Rockefeller University, and then Memorial Sloan Kettering is there, and Presbyterian has a site there too. So they're all loosely affiliated with each other. Looking at the zoning map, the area map right there, the area consists primarily of high-density residential R9 and R10. HSS is in an R9, which permits 7.52 FAR for residential and 10 for community facilities. The R10 permits 10 FAR for residential and CF uses. These districts are mapped along York Avenue and east to the river. There's a C15 overlay zone here. These are on the retail frontages along York Avenue, along the R10, and that's to allow for ground floor retail uses. There's a small high-density commercial district located here, a C52, right there. And you'll know that as Sotheby's, where they have a auction house, galleries, and offices. There's a small M14 district located just to the north at the top of the map, the area map there. That permits 2.0 FAR for manufacturing uses and a C19 also at the very tip of the northern area. So, in 1971, New York State adopted legislation authorizing the city to close and discontinue airspace over FDR Drive and some adjacent streets for the purpose of allowing expansions of HSS, New York Presbyterian, and Rockefeller University. In order to implement the 71 legislation, the City Planning Commission and the Board of Estimate approved the demapping of the airspace and also approved the agreement between the three institutions in the city in 1973. So this 1973 agreement outlines the conditions and procedures by which these institutions could develop the airspace over the FDR Drive and over the adjacent streets, and this remains in effect today. There have been multiple discretionary actions over the years using this agreement. Now, the original HSS hospital is this more triangle area here. That's the original hospital. It was built as of right in the 1950s. The former East 70th Street was demapped in 1973. So the area of 1973, East 70th Street was demapped for the length between Presbyterian and HSS. The 8-story east wing of the HSS's main hospital was approved by the City Planning Commission in 1992 and built on a platform spanning over FDR Drive. This east wing was further enlarged by 3 stories in 2008. The HSS has a few other buildings in there, including the Casbury Research Building, located on the northern side, and the Bel Air Building. This is Casbury, and that's the existing, they're both existing, Bel Air and Casbury. And of course, the 12-story River Building, which is located over the FDR Drive, it was approved in 2008, but it has not been built as of yet. These actions pertain only to the east wing and west wing, which is the main hospital. So the development site is located at 535 East 70th Street, an approximately 77,049 square foot zoning lot. The zoning lot includes Lot 20, which is the main hospital site, and the 3 parcels that are located over East 71st, DMAP 70th, and then over the FDR Drive. The development site contains the 1 building with the 2 wings that are interconnected. The west wing is a 5 to 11-story structure west of the FDR Drive with 225,151 square foot of zoning floor area. The east wing, located above FDR Drive, is 12 stories and has approximately 171,025 square feet of zoning floor area. And their 2 buildings are interconnected on most floors and house most of the critical functions of the hospital. So up to 412,260 square feet of floor area is permitted on the zoning site, on the development site, excuse me, and the total existing floor area is 396,176. As of right, the total permitted lot coverage would be 50,082 square feet, and the approved lot coverage is 55,820 square feet. Now I want to take you through how the former East 70th Street functions. As I mentioned, it was demapped in 1973, and as you can see from the photo board right here, there's been substantial development in and around the area. The largest development in the area over the street is the Star Pavilion. It's at 11 stories. This is looking down 70th Street here. This is the Star Pavilion. This is also right there. That's New York Presbyterian Star Pavilion. It was approved by the City Planning Commission in 1980 and extends all the way over the street and connects to the other side of the street. There's also an enclosed pedestrian bridge. This is just east of the Star Pavilion. Actually, you can see it right here behind the Star Pavilion. This is enclosed, and it takes you from New York Presbyterian to HSS. At the second floor level, this bridge was mandated by the State Health Systems Agency to provide an efficient connection between the 2 hospitals. So at the eastern end, looking here, there's a 60-foot ramp. The 60-foot wide service ramp goes all the way from the HSS building to the New York Presbyterian building. The ramp has a 12% slope upward and occupies the entire width of the street. There's a small loading area. You can see it right here. This vehicle is backed in. There's a small loading area for HSS. There are vehicles, typically HSS vehicles and delivery vehicles parked along the curb there. That is a no standing zone. But they serve the building and the functions. Now, New York Presbyterian, you can go up the ramp and you make a right. So if you're coming up the ramp, you have the loading area for HSS. If you come up the ramp and turn south, that's the ambulance and service area for New York Presbyterian. There are sidewalks on the ramp that you narrow down to 4 feet at some areas. The whole ramp is not pedestrian-friendly environment, but it is owned by HSS and New York Presbyterian. And at the top of the ramp, as you can see from this photo here, is a 9/11 memorial. It's mainly, I think it was created by New York Presbyterian, and it's on their side of the building. And so at the top of the 12% grade ramp is a memorial. And I guess if you can get to it, then you can go look out over at the memorial, and it goes over the river. You can see out over the river. There's a bank of greenery there. So just to give you a brief rundown of the movements. So if you're a vehicle and you're coming down East 70th Street, this is two-way. Two-way down former East 70th Street. There's a garage under here, and it comes one way from here to here, and the ramp is two-way. So if you're up here at the top of the ramp, you can go into the loading area, you can go into New York Presbyterian, or you can come down and go through HSS's main drop-off and pickup area. So we'll go on to the waiver boards. So the Hospital for Special Surgery is seeking a new special permit under Section 74682 to allow for the expansion of the West Wing building that would extend over former East 70th Street. This expansion would begin at the third floor and extend upward for a total of 4 floors, including a mechanical floor. So the building expansion is right here. This is the ramp going up. This is approximately the third floor right here. So that's the first floor, which is the third, fourth, fifth, sixth. The sixth would be mechanical. The expansion will allow HSS to increase the number of surgeries they're able to perform by approximately 2,500. The proposed enlargement would extend 22 feet over the service ramp and would also be a length of 128 feet and 2 inches. And you can see that here. This is the proposed addition here. It's 22 feet wide, 128 2 inches long over the former East 70th Street. And you can see another elevation of it there. As required pursuant to zoning resolution section 2435B, the development site would maintain an 8-foot wide side yard, which is right next to the proposed addition. There are no other changes to parking, curb cuts, or loading berths as a result of the project. The enlargement will be supported by extending the existing columns holding up the service ramp to the underside of the proposed enlargement, and therefore no new below-grade areas would need to be demapped. The maximum floor plate size of the enlargement would be 2,820 square feet. Access to support areas and ambulance berths at the top of the ramp would be maintained with 3 travel lanes on the service ramp. So the proposed enlargement would result in a total of 404, 106 square feet of zoning floor area, and the total lot coverage would be 58,640 square feet. Now I'd like to show you the illustration that we provided. So this is the proposed enlargement right here. This area here, there's the ramp going up, there's the existing pedestrian bridge. The addition would not readily be discernible except in the immediate vicinity of the development site because the Star Pavilion already blocks all views in the area, or most views of the area, and the pedestrian bridge also blocks views, and the ramp also blocks views to the corridor, to view out. Because of the previous actions in this area, the pedestrian environment is limited, and there's minimal pedestrian access on the service ramp structure already. So to facilitate the proposed project, 2 actions by the Commission are required. First, the special permit under Section 74682 is required to modify the maximum percentage of lot coverage set forth in Section 2411 in order to allow for an increase in the lot coverage in the development site by an additional 2,820 square feet. While East 70th Street east of York Avenue no longer exists at this location, other portions of the development site are within demapped airspace, allowing for use of the special permit. So under this section of the zoning resolution, the City Planning Commission may permit modification of bulk regulations if certain findings are met. The main finding is that the location and distribution of the new bulk shall result in a good site plan in relation to the existing buildings on site and in the area. In addition, the project will require the City Planning Commission to make a certain findings under paragraph E of Exhibit H of the 1973 agreement, namely that such construction will not substantially interfere with the vehicular and pedestrian use of the FDR drive or the streets, and that such construction shall be in accordance with the provisions of the agreement.
Thank you, Stephen. Questions? Mr. Cantor?
Is there any intent to try and make the traffic coming off the FDR and up on 70th Street to improve that?
No, this has no effect on the traffic over the FDR, under the development site. It's not related to, there's no connection to it at East 70th Street.
Ms. Deluz?
So Stephen, to your last point about paragraph E, about that the construction shouldn't substantially interfere with the vehicular and pedestrian uses. So, thanks for answering the FDR piece. So when it says "or the streets," does that include the demapped street?
I don't think it does.
Okay, and so the second half of that question is, so since there doesn't seem to be any pedestrian use currently, this doesn't worsen the existing condition?
I think that's the idea. I like to say I used the ramp, I walked up the ramp to look at the site, and it's very limited in pedestrian activity there.
And does it seem like there's any opportunity to improve the pedestrian experience? Seems like there might be.
Well, you could make a more coherent connection to the memorial. We have Presbyterian has got markings here. I don't know why, probably so they could park vehicles, but if you made an actual sidewalk that led up to the memorial area, then it would be a nicer experience. And it's similar on the other side with the HSS side. They have, like I mentioned, they have vehicles parked in the area that would be underneath the ramp here.
So
it's a no standing area, so they're not supposed to be parked there. And the columns that will be supporting it would be in the marked off area.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Stephen? Okay, certified.
Thank you, Stephen. Stephen also has our next item. This is item number 4, page 92, a proposed City Planning Commission certification for a transfer of air rights from a listed theater to facilitate a mixed-use development at 567th Avenue in the Special Midtown District Theater Subdistrict. We're now on item number 4, page 92.
Coming back.
Okay, this is an application by the City Planning Commission for a City Planning Commission certification pursuant to zoning resolution section 84744A to permit the transfer of 19,771.5 square feet of floor area of unused development rights from the Neil Simon Theater to the zoning lot at 567th Avenue. Both the granting and receiving sites are in Community District 5 and located in the theater subdistrict of the Special Midtown District. The transfer will facilitate the development of a proposed new hotel and retail space at 567th Avenue and will permit an increase of 20% or 2.0 FAR over the receiving site's base FAR of 10, which is the maximum allowable transfer. Now, the Special Midtown District was created in order to aid the preservation and rehabilitation of existing theaters and protect the character of Manhattan's theater district. The Special Midtown District provides the mechanism for the transfer of these development rights from listed theaters in the zoning resolution to sites within the theater subdistrict. The use of this provision requires a contribution to the theater subdistrict fund. Now, the granting site is up here on the boards. It's the Neil Simon Theater. You can see it, the site on the area map there and the 3 photos here. It's located at 250 West 52nd Street, and it is listed in the zoning resolution, section 81742. It is an active theater which was designated a city landmark in 1985 for the individual building and also for the interior first floor. It is located mid-block on the south side of the street between Broadway and 8th Avenue in a C65 zoning district which permits a maximum FAR of 10. It is located 12 blocks north of the receiving site. The theater occupies 26,012 square feet with an FAR of 2.1. There are 97 1,838 square feet in excess development rights in the theater, and the granting site has not previously sold any portion of those rights. And with the transfer to 567th Avenue, there will be 78,066.5 square feet remaining. So this is Simon Theater. Simon Theater there. In the block.
Clean, I know. We're going to legislate that. Free of that dollars and... You know,
This is the receiving site. So the receiving site is located at 567th Avenue in an M16 zoning district at the northwest corner of 7th Avenue and 40th Street. The M16 district allows an FIR of 10. The site is currently developed with a 6-story building with approximately 49,000 square feet and an FIR of 4.96. The building is also currently vacant, except for the Garment Center congregation, which is located in the cellar. So it's the old Parsons School, new school. Here's the illustration of the development. The applicant is proposing to demolish the existing building and enlarge it to an approximately 118,629 square feet or 12 FAR building, including the transfer from the granting site. This is a view of the building on that street corner. It is expected to be approximately 29 stories with retail uses up to the 3rd floor, the hotel lobby on the 4th floor, and approximately 237 hotel rooms at 92,672 square feet. The retail uses will be approximately 24,250 square feet. Now, the Garment Center congregation will return to the cellar location of the proposed new development in approximately the same square footage that it currently occupies. As part of the conditions for transferring the development rights, the appropriate legal documents have been filed or drafted, assuring the continued use of the Neil Simon Theater site as a legitimate theater, and the Landmarks Preservation Commission has reviewed the building inspection reports and accepted them as of March 2nd, 2015. Now, the Neil Simon Theater is physically and operationally sound and does not require any maintenance programs. The inspection report would be filed every 5 years and provided to the chairman of the City Planning Commission and the LPC. The applicant must also deposit $347,970.40 into the theater subdistrict fund at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Stephen. Questions? Ms. Levin.
I have a question that doesn't really pertain to our jurisdiction here, but I'm curious. Is there temporary relocation space or a temporary relocation plan for the synagogue?
I'm not sure if there is. I'll check into that.
All right, well, we'll find out when it comes back.
I think they're still occupying the cellar at the moment.
Right, and I see that the plan is to include a synagogue. I assume that's a replacement for this congregation, but obviously they're not going to stay there while the thing is developed, so.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
We'll try to get an answer even before it comes back. Okay. Any other questions for Stephen? Okay, this gets referred to the community board, the local council member, and the borough president for 60 days, and we'll see it in a couple of months. Thanks, Stephen.
Let's now advance to item number 5, page 120. It's Manhattan non-ULURP application that's returning from public review with respect to a modification to an existing special permit to facilitate Seward Park. We're on item number 5, page 120, Manhattan non-ULURP District Road.
Good afternoon again. So this is an application by the Department of Housing, Preservation, and Development for approval of a minor modification to the Seward Park large-scale general development. The application specifically seeks to modify the design controls applicable to sites 1 and 5 of the Seward Park LSGD, which is located in the Lower East Side within Manhattan Community District 3. The Seward Park LSGD special permit was approved by the Commission in August 2012 and created the zoning and land use framework for the Seward Park mixed-use development project. And this will be an approximately 1.65 million square foot mixed-use development. In total, the project will be built on 9 sites. 3 of the sites are located on the east side of Essex Street, north of Delancey Street, and the remaining 6 sites are located south of Delancey Street within the large-scale general development. The 6 sites within the LSGD are bounded by Delancey Street to the north, Broome and Grant Streets to the south, the mid-block of Clinton and Reade Streets to the east, and Ludlow Streets to the west. The sites are currently underutilized and contain a mix of parking, vacant, and partially vacant commercial uses and a small residential building. So going right into the proposed modifications, on site 1, the proposed action seeks to allow for the tapering of the base of the building for a length of 92 feet along Ludlow Street, within the 92 feet along Ludlow Street within its intersection with Broome Street, and that tapering will be at a depth of no more than 6 feet. And this will allow for a wider sidewalk and better pedestrian circulation in this area. And because the LSGD design controls require that the base of each development uniformly meet the street line, a modification to the design controls is required. And then on site 5, which is here and here, the proposed action seeks to allow for the reduction of the minimum base height to 29 feet along Clinton Street, 65 feet from its intersection with Grand Street, and then along the open space frontage, so it's here and here. And this will allow for the residential tower in the proposed development to start on the 3rd floor, which you can see in the renderings here. And because the LSGD design controls require a 60-foot minimum base height for the entire length of Clinton Street and along the open space frontage, the modification is necessary. So the application was heard at Community Board 3's Land Use Committee on March 10th, and the committee passed a resolution recommending approval for the project. And that resolution was approved by the full board on March 24th, 2014, or 2015.
Thank you, Joel. Questions? Ms. Levin.
As I noticed from, I'm sure it was in our news clippings or I read it someplace else, but that the Andy Warhol Museum has decided not to participate in this project. And at least when you read the applicant's discussion of the findings about that aspect of the modifications is justified as creating an entrance for the Warhol Museum, you articulated the purpose of that widening in a different way that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I take it that the withdrawal of the museum really doesn't have any effect on the desirability of our consideration of this application.
That's correct, and the applicant is looking for a tenant for that space, and it will be a community facility space. So.
Which would presumably have the same entrance needs. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Joel? Ms. Efron.
Just along that same question, it's not anticipated that that plaza then becomes a food and drink establishment. I mean, they're
on site 5?
Yes.
No, and actually the Andy Warhol Museum is on site 1.
Oh, I misread the picture then.
Oh, sorry. So site, let me just bring this back up.
That's okay. So then my question's answered. I know that's the school site, but for some reason I misread it as Andy Warhol and the school site being in the same.
No, different.
Okay.
Different sites.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, I'll entertain by a show of hands, sending an approval letter to the Department of Buildings. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Okay, thank you, Joel.
Thank you.
Let's now advance to item number 6, page 161. It's also a Manhattan non-ULO post-referral application with respect to the collegiate school, the proposed collegiate school at Riverside South. We're on item number 6, page 161, and our presenter is Carolina.
We welcome Carolina back from her maternity leave.
Yes.
On this auspicious occasion, right.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This is an application by Hudson Waterfront Associates and the Collegiate School to modify the previously approved Riverside South General Large-Scale Development Special Permit and Restrictive Declaration to enable the development of a 9-story building to house the Collegiate School on the Upper West Side in Manhattan Community District 7. This application was referred to the Community Board and Borough President on June 9, 2014. The Collegiate School is an independent boys' school, which has been at its current location at West 77th and 78th Streets between Broadway and West End Avenue since 1892. The school enrolls 640 boys in grades K through 12 and employs 170 faculty and staff. It is currently housed in 3 adjacent buildings, only one of which was actually purpose-built as a school. Existing facilities have become outmoded and operationally challenging, and varied ownership and landmark designation preclude Collegiate from being able to redevelop its current site. Collegiate School, in discussions with the co-applicant, has selected parcel K2 in the Riverside South large scale as the site for relocation. Please let me know if you can't see this. Parcel K2 is bordered by West 62nd Street to the north, West 61st Street to the south, Freedom Place, and parcel K1 to the west. It is a 30,000 square foot portion of zoning lot JK, which is outlined here in blue, which additionally includes parcels J1, J2, and K1. The zoning lot is between West 61st Street, West 63rd, Freedom Place, and Riverside Boulevard. It is one of 8 zoning lots on parcels A through O in the original Riverside South large scale, which spans the area west of West End Avenue to the Hudson River between West 59th and West 72nd Streets. This is the condition of the current site. This is looking south towards the Con Edison steam plant on 58th Street. This is looking west towards the water that's the building being constructed on site K1, parcel K1, and this is looking north towards the existing Riverside South buildings. The Riverside South large-scale special permit was approved in 1992 to allow up to 7.9 million square feet of development. The large scale has to be built out in accordance with the special permit plans and restrictive declaration, which the applicants seek to modify in this application. In 2010, Riverside South large-scale special permit was modified with the Riverside Center large scale, containing parcels L, M, and N, shown here just south. That's the site of the proposed school, and this is LMN Riverside Center, which is part of the larger Riverside South running north. Riverside South is largely completed. Parcel K2 is the last unbuilt parcel. Riverside Center, parcels L, M, and N is also under construction. While mapped in an R10 zoning district with a C25 overlay over portion, zoning lot JK is governed by the bulk and urban design controls of the 1992 special permit. On zoning lot JK, the large-scale permits 1.358 million square feet of floor area to include a maximum of 47,200 square feet of community facility space, 55,000 square feet of commercial floor area, and 1.35 million square feet of residential floor area, not to exceed 1,779 units. Parcels J1, J2, and K1 have been built or are under construction with residential buildings, which include some commercial use, that occupy almost all of the floor area allotted to the zoning lot, absent 124,000 square feet. The current approvals for allow for a residential building of up to 332 feet with mandatory ground floor retail space on parcel K2. The applicants are proposing a new school building on site K2 of 124,000 square feet to accommodate 640 students, the number currently enrolled. The building will rise to 8 stories. 8 stories on the northern portion. This is looking at from Freedom Place South. 8 stories on the northern portion, 9 stories on the southern portion, with a maximum building envelope of 193 feet. An entry plaza will lead to a recessed main entrance along Freedom Place South. Outdoor play areas are proposed to the west of the school building at grade and on the roof of above the 8th floor. The school will include a gym and theater spaces below grade, entry, administration, and dining on the ground floor, as well as grade-specific and shared facilities on the floors above. With the completion of the school, zoning lot JK would be built to the maximum floor area permitted of 1.358 million square feet, or 8.9 FAR. The special permit and its plans will be modified to permit the allocation of 124,000 square feet of community facility floor area on zoning lot JK for the school. This increase in community facility floor area is a reallocation of available floor area and implies a concurrent reduction of any other permitted floor area for any other use permitted on zoning lot JK. The total allowable floor area of 1.358 million square feet on zoning lot JK remains unchanged. The plans are also modified to reflect a lower building. The existing K2 building envelope will be reduced from 332 feet to 193 feet. The urban design controls in the plans are also proposed to be modified to eliminate a required street wall on the side streets, which will be instead replaced with a play area. Eliminate the mandatory retail frontage on Freedom Place South to allow for the school entrance, cafeteria, and offices, and alter materiality and recess controls, which were originally stipulated for residential building, to be more consistent with the school building and its programmatic needs. Finally, as originally referred, the application included a modification to the restrictive declaration to allow 55 affordable units originally anticipated on parcel K2 to be located in Riverside South or Riverside Center. The Community Board and Borough President both issued letters in July reinforcing support of the collegiate school and its continued location on the Upper West Side. Community Board 7 expressed concerns regarding two elements of the school's design. The stone base, this is the original rendering, that the stone base rising to up to 9 feet at Freedom Place and West 61st Street would deter street life. Similarly, the board called out the height of the wall separating the playground from West 62nd Street. That it might also result in a poor pedestrian condition, and it's not actually visible here, but the concern was regarding the wall separating the playground from the street. Secondly, the Board 7 reinforced the conditions for the provision of 55 units, that is, that they be provided before the issuance of a certificate of occupancy. The Borough President echoed many of the Board's comments, asking that there be additional clarity regarding the location of the 55 units, and that the street level design be improved. There have been updates. Following receipt of the community boards and borough president's comments, the applicant made changes to the building as follows. On West 62nd Street, here, the wall separating the playground from the street has been lowered to a maximum height of 6 feet 10 inches. There is a change in grade at this site, so it would be a maximum of 6 feet 10 inches, which was previously 10.5 feet. This wall will be topped with a planting bed, and behind it will be a slatted fence of up to 16 feet that will also be planted with vines. And it's important to keep in mind that a solid wall is required by the restrictive declaration for noise attenuation. The base of the building previously rose to a maximum height of 9 feet, shown here. This is a corner of Freedom Place South and West 61st Street, and this base previously rose to 9 feet, but is now proposed to rise to the base at the street line will rise to a height of 2 feet, or maximum height of 2 feet. It will recess for the depth of 1.5 feet and then rise to a maximum height of 6 feet on Freedom Place. This setback affords increased glazing on the ground floor, visibility into and from the school, and an opportunity to include lighting in the recess. And these revisions to the building design are captured in the drawings. Following an extensive effort by the applicants, the location of the 55 affordable units in either Riverside South or Riverside Center proved to be infeasible. The modification to the 1992 restrictive declaration, as originally proposed, has been revised to instead allow for a monetary contribution of $50 million to the city intended for the construction of a minimum of 55 units of affordable housing in Community District 7. This contribution will be required before the school is issued any building permits. The community board submitted a letter dated March 11th that states that the board's preference for the location of the 55 units in Riverside South or Riverside Center, but that should the funding be provided instead, that it result in a minimum of 55 units and that, again, those units be located in District 7, and that's in fact what the restrictive deck requires. The board made further comments concerning changes to the building design, I left a letter addressed to me from the applicant on the commission's dais explaining there were several clarifications to the board's comments. But in sum, the applicant has reduced the height of the stone building base, integrated transparency, lowered the playground wall, and included planting as the community board originally requested in July. And finally, the board asked for a traffic management plan in its March letter. The technical memorandum and restrictive declaration require traffic monitoring plan consistent with analysis being conducted for Riverside Center. And it's to be prepared for DOT's approval and review and approval both before and after the school begin operation.
Thank you, Carolina. Questions? Let's start with Mr. Cantor.
You said the building is going to be how tall? 180?
193 feet.
193, and it's an 8-story building?
It's up to a 9-story building. A segment of the building rises to 9 stories.
That's like a 20-foot floor-to-floor. I don't understand something.
It's high floor-to-ceiling heights because of the school's program.
Really? Okay. That's a lot of sense.
Ms. Levin, and then Ms. Deleuze.
First, Carolina, welcome back.
Thank you very much.
I hope your household is thriving. That you're getting a little
messy,
bit,
but thriving.
That you're getting a little bit of sleep. I have one urban design question, and then my real concerns about this current situation are focused on the affordable housing commitment and the $50 million. The urban design, first, I'm delighted to see that so many of the changes that at least some of us had asked about at referral and the community board has emphasized have now been addressed. The street wall treatment that is in the board closest to you for the playground area, is it going to be the same on the 61st Street side?
There's actually an opening. There's no wall separation. The playground extends only in two. The playground actually extends into just the sort of the middle portion, and the rest is actually open area. And there won't be a wall separating that area from the street.
So as you walk by on the street, it will be open, active. What will you see? Will the open, who's the open area accessible to?
I believe it's to be shared space between, I believe it's going to be accessible to K1. And from the renderings I've seen, and again, taken with a grain of salt, there's going to be seating out in that open area.
Okay, so as pedestrians walk by, will they be walking by a wall, or will they be watching kids playing?
There is a change.
Some activity
There
visible?
is a change in grade there, so there are steps up, but I believe just visually it's no more than a couple of feet.
Okay, okay. So I think, for me at least, and I think I gather from the public conversation, the most problematic aspect of this has been what to do about the shortfall, the number of affordable units yet to be delivered against the expectations out of the 1992 Riverside South restricted declaration. And I think there are differing points of view about whether the amount of that requirement is calculated simply based on the development that will be concluded with the building on K1, which is just about to be completed, or whether it is calculated on the basis of that plus the Riverside Center sites, which are sites L, M, and N. And as we all know, as I think you explained, in 2010, when the Riverside Center application went through, there was a new restrictive declaration put in place for L, M, and N that kind of took them out, took the affordability requirements for those sites out of the 1992 restrictive declaration. But they didn't take L, M, and N out of the restricted declaration altogether. It just said when you're calculating the affordable housing requirement for L, M, and N, you follow these rules. So we're now, let's say, 55 units short on the expectation under the 1992 declaration. So my question for today is whether that there continues to be an argument that The 92 requirement was for 12% of affordable across the entire area, including LM&N. Are we still working against that commitment? Will the 12% commitment continue to be fulfilled? Okay.
Yes, the 12% commitment, I'm sorry, did you?
Yeah, well, the punchline question for me is this $50 million payment in any way a replacement for or a reduction of affordable housing that is legally required under the 92 declaration? I noticed that you're carefully, that the modification of the restrictive declaration that we're voting on today carefully uses the phrase anticipated affordable housing, not required affordable housing. So is there any diminution of the 92 requirements for affordable housing?
And perhaps council can help address that. And Allison McCabe?
Good afternoon. Yes, Commissioner Levin, you raised the point that back in 2010, when we approved the Riverside Center large scale, we ideally wanted to segregate Riverside Center from the original requirement. And at that point, we saw the 92 requirement as playing out through Parcel K. And so fast forward to Collegiate's proposal to site the school on K2, we recognized that expectation was not going to be met as we had thought. And so Collegiate proposed to make up that shortfall with those 55 units, which, as Carolina explained, could not be met, could not be sited within Riverside South, Riverside Center. And so we believe that Collegiate is making whole on that expectation through their payment of the $50 million into a fund which will facilitate affordable housing within the community district. That said, you know, we never thought of a hybrid world where we would be looking at how the original 92 requirement would overlap with Riverside Center. We never contemplated that world. But we are confident that with the strict inclusionary housing program application to Riverside Center and the way that we did apply it, which we applied it on a building by building basis in Riverside Center, so that for each building, each of the 5 buildings in Riverside Center, they'll have to actually comply with the 20% of the floor area affordability requirement for each building. You know, that means they'll provide 20% in connection with each building. So we're confident that the 92 12% minimum requirement will be met if not exceeded. So, but like I said, that's a world that we never anticipated. That's
okay.
How I'm going to comment on that question.
Okay. Does that mean then that we are potentially counting affordable units on Riverside Center both toward the 12% commitment as well as toward an inclusionary housing component? That the same unit could be counted for 2 different purposes?
Right. That's right.
That's possible.
Yes.
I think that's something about which there has been and could continue to be robust discussion. Is there anything in the 6th modification of the declaration that we're about to, I assume, approve, that influences that discussion?
It merely addresses Collegiate's commitment for the affordable housing payment in lieu of the 55 units.
Anticipated but not required. The payment's required. The units were anticipated.
At least my understanding is that the original, as Allison said, the original requirement of 12% affordable units for the entire Riverside South site, including Riverside Center, will be met, in fact exceeded, as perhaps not in a way that was initially contemplated, but in fact will be exceeded, and that the action on-site, and that the action that Collegiate's action will not undermine that commitment, if that's what your question is.
Yeah.
I just want to say one thing clarifying to that point, Anna, which is that when Riverside Center was done in 2010, there was no provision made in the deck that created LMNN to make the 12% requirement for Riverside South writ large discrete for the balance of those units. So the 12% obligation really is an obligation that extends over the entire original Riverside South site. So as Allison said, knowing that and also understanding the public perception that there would be 12% on that sort of balance of Riverside South, we imposed this 55% requirement, 55 unit requirement, but understanding that it's not technically legally required because you can count units on Riverside Center towards fulfillment of that 12% obligation. That's how we came to impose the requirement. But I think the confusion is that people think that that requirement is to satisfy the 12% on the Riverside South balance, and it really is not.
Okay, except that, has your thinking on this evolved? Because when this was referred out, as is indicated in our briefing sheet, the idea then was to modify the 92 declaration to allow 55 affordable units to be provided elsewhere in Riverside South or Riverside Center. But of course, that's how the rules have always worked. So why did you need to say so in June?
We were planning to modify the deck to clarify that the 55 units would be cited, could be cited within Riverside Center. They didn't have to be on site K2. They could be added to the inclusionary requirements within Riverside Center.
Okay, except that you're now saying that that's the way the declaration works anyway, so that kind of we don't need to get into this level of detail here. I just want to say, I am enthusiastically in support of allowing this site to be used for a school, and I recognize the need to allow Collegiate to get on with it and get their building permit. I appreciate the changes in the urban design situation. My only concern is about this complicated discussion about fulfillment of a deal made in 1992 to produce, at that point, 684 units of affordable housing, and here we are more than 20 years later trying to complete a promise that was hard fought, much discussed, tenaciously argued for by many people, some of whom are still in this room and some of whom are not. And I think it's important, particularly as we are in a new administration that is pushing so hard for the fulfillment of affordable housing commitments, to not forget the fights that went before and to be sure that we finish all of the business that we bargained for. So I'm going to cling to my lawyerly understanding, embedded in the question I asked Allison, that there's nothing in this Sixth Amendment to the restrictive declaration that diminishes the affordable housing requirement in the 92 declaration. And on that basis only, I'll stick my hand up when the moment comes.
We would agree that that's correct.
We need all the affordable housing that was bargained for in Riverside South.
I would simply add to that assuming this commission supports this action, that the net result will be that, yes, the 12% originally envisioned for the entire Riverside South project will be met on-site and in fact exceeded. B, that as a result of the proposal before you, there will actually be an additional number of permanently affordable units in Community Board 7, albeit not these additional units will not be on-site because, see, in addition to the explanations from council, as a factual matter, there is no way to provide those additional units on-site. But just, again, going back to I think your basic point, which we all agree on, is that there will be on-site in Riverside South as a whole more affordable units than was originally required in 1992. Ms. Adela Oos, then Ms. Efron, and then Mr. Cantor.
First, I just want to say that Commissioner Levin's comments and concerns are ones that I share as well. And I think we as a city and those of us that are affordable housing advocates have learned a lot since 1992 and even 2010 about how to ensure the delivery of units in a phased approach as development happens. And I think, I know that those lessons are embedded in current proposals that we see, but when we look back, I think we see where some of the loopholes are. In the end, though, I believe that the $50 million is significant. It should provide for more than 55 units of affordable housing. They can be permanently affordable with a fund of that size. And I think it's important to acknowledge that as well. Although, again, it would have much more important to have commitments met in a timely fashion, especially for a project that was approved so long ago. But here we are today with the situation at hand. And I also appreciate the changes to the design. And welcome back, Carolina.
Thank you.
Ms. Efron, then Mr. Cantor, then Mr. Moran.
I just wanted to underscore what Commissioner Dela said, which is that this is a significant dollar amount for permanent affordable housing. It's also a significant dollar amount for an independent school to make available for something outside of its mission, even though it will result in a building fulfilling its mission, and with all the history of it, it seems like a reasonable compromise. I just have a question, two questions. One is, will it be a letter, just technically, will it be a letter of credit drawn down when there is the need, or is this a cash transfer to the city, and therefore, regardless of what the actual cost is or whether nothing ever gets built, it is still a commitment of the school? And my second question is really just a design one. More and more often now, schools are having less glass, particularly at entry level, because of recent history of school violence. And I'm just from a public safety point of view, want to confirm that that shatterproof glass, any place where there is public access on the street level.
Okay, with regards to your first question, and I'll let Allison nod at me. It is a contribution that's going to be held by the Department of Finance, and that is required before any building permit can be issued.
I think in all likelihood will be held by HDC, the Housing Development Corporation. No? No? POF, no? Yes, you're right. Department of Finance.
And with regard to your question about the glass, shatterproof glass, I can't speak to that. I imagine the school is meeting all of the requirements for safety.
Well, I don't think there.
Okay.
I don't think the requirements are stipulated by the Department of Buildings. I just am a little bit familiar with schools' needs in the post-Sandy Hook era, and it just seems, given the direct public access and that this is a new school, it would just be nice to confirm, not just for the students in the school, but for the public safety of the immediate neighbors, that it is shatterproof.
Mr. Cantor.
Back to the $50 million. Is there a site that has been chosen to put these housing units in?
Well, the site has to be in Community District 7, and HPD is working very, very closely to identify an appropriate site. And in the commission's package, there was a site that was provisionally called out on 108th Street, but that discussion is ongoing.
Is this, if the owner of that site doesn't desire to sell, do we go to eminent domain?
It's a city-owned site.
Oh, it's a city-owned site?
Yes. It's been in HPD's portfolio for some time.
How was the $50 million arrived at? That's like $90,000 all in.
Again, I believe that it was, HPD was consulted on the appropriate amount in order to be able to achieve the minimum 55 units.
And is that in today's dollars?
Yes.
And there's no correlation between when the collegiate school opens and this affordable housing is opened, is there?
There isn't. The only requirement is that the money be made available before collegiate can pull any building permits.
So we have the money in hand.
That's right.
Okay.
Mr. Moran.
Commissioners Efron and Cantor did ask my questions, but I do have one follow-up based on your response. So it's going to the Department of Finance. Is this going into the general fund of the Department of Finance? Is there a special kitty that it's going to be earmarked for development? I mean, how do we ensure that this $50 million gets secured for affordable housing as a result of this?
It's being isolated for this particular use. It is not going into the general fund.
Thank you.
Ms. Ortiz.
Once the 55 units have been met, and those have to be built within Community Board 7, can those additional units be built in other places so that we can get perhaps more units than we had anticipated? It's obviously a lot cheaper to build affordable units outside of Manhattan.
Well, the money has to, the entirety of the $50 million has to be spent in Community District 7. Because there isn't a site selected yet, it's difficult to determine what could be budgeted for that particular site, so maybe more than one site, but the $50 million has to be spent in CD7, yes.
But if it turns out that the site that HPD has identified is feasible and acceptable to all concerned, the likelihood is that there will be many more than 55 units on that site. But again, that process is ongoing between HPD, the community, and to look at alternatives throughout Community Board 7. Ms. Levin.
I'm sorry, just a point of clarification. Who is it that's obligated to make this payment? Is it the school, is it the collegiate school, or is it Hudson Waterfront Associates LP?
I believe it's a school.
It's the school?
Yes.
But the payment has to be made and the check has to be cleared.
Correct, correct.
before a building permit gets issued. Any other questions about this? I really just, this has been a long, ongoing process, and I really just want to commend so many people here who have worked on this over the past several months to try to find a good solution to a very difficult and challenging issue. And among them is, of course, Edith Suchen, the head of the Manhattan office, Carolina, Eric Botsford, the deputy director of the Manhattan office, and Anita Lermont and Allison McCabe. This has been a very, very difficult, challenging process, and I really want to commend them. And I also want to note that this will conclude a red letter day for the Manhattan Office of City Planning, from Vanderbilt Corridor to Collegiate School to West 23rd Street to the Hospital for Special Surgery to the Lower East Side. It's really been through a transfer of development rights from in the theater subdistrict. This really is an indication of the extraordinary work and variety of work that they do, and I really especially want to congratulate and thank Edith and her team for their extraordinary efforts throughout on so many, many fronts. And Edith, thank you and your team. And with that, I would ask for a sent by a show of hands to send an approval letter to the Department of Buildings so that this can proceed. Thank you. Thank you, Carolina.
Let's now move to item number 7, page 204, Proposed Urban Development Action Area Project, Designation, Project Approval, Disposition of City-Owned Property, and a special permit to facilitate over 250 units of affordable housing on Melrose Commons North, Site B. Our presenter is Benita of the Bronx office, and we're on item number 7, page 204.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This application, Melrose Commons North RFP Site B, was submitted by the Department of Housing Preservation and Development to facilitate the development of Bronx Commons, a 277-unit affordable housing mixed-use development, which also has retail and community facility uses. There are 2 actions required to facilitate this project. The first action is disposition of city-owned property, UDAP designation and project approval. The second action is a special permit pursuant to 74-681 to allow for development over a railroad right-of-way. The development team includes Blue Sea Development, who will develop the affordable housing component, and WEDCO, Women's Housing and Economic Development Corporation, who will develop the retail and community facility space. The project is located in the Melrose neighborhood in Community District 3 of the Bronx. It's bound by 162nd Street to the south, 163rd Street to the north, Elton Avenue to the east, and it covers almost half the block, 2384. The site is mostly vacant currently. It has one former refrigeration equipment warehouse, which is 1 story. The remainder of the site is vacant. There are several constraints on the site, including a sewer easement. A sewer easement on the extension of Brook Avenue, the abandoned railroad right-of-way, both of which run cut diagonally across the site. The city acquired the air rights over the Port Morris Freight Railroad in 1998, and the air rights are currently in the jurisdiction of HPD. The rail line was officially abandoned in 2003. The site was rezoned from R72 to R8 with a commercial overlay as part of the application 150152 ZMX. The approval was received on March 11th. There were other actions that also facilitated this site, which was a city map change and amendments to the urban renewal plan. That package of action facilitated Site C, as well as 3 of the actions facilitated Site B. At this point, we're looking at the disposition and special permit for development of a railroad right-of-way. The area surrounding the project includes several new affordable housing developments, including Bariqua Village and Bariqua Village to the east. Bariqua College is on this corner of Elton Avenue. The Cortland Corners development are along Melrose Avenue to the east, Cortland Crescent, again further north to the west. Parkview Commons are to the south, and Site B is the site outlined in red, and across to the street or to the south will be Site C. As I said, the actions will facilitate 277 affordable housing units, 26,700 square feet of retail space, and 25,390 gross square feet of community facility space. The building The building ranges from 1 to 12 stories. At the corner of Elton Avenue and 162nd Street will be a one-story structure for the community facility. This is the Bronx Music Heritage Center. The Bronx Music Heritage Center, which will be operated by Vedco, has been currently operating in a temporary space at 1303 Louis Ninia Boulevard since 2012. At this new location, it will have a 250-seat black box performance space for cultural and community events, exhibit areas for permanent and rotating exhibits, sound-isolated recording studios, rehearsal and classroom space for music and dance, digital archives, and a cafe. The center will host live concerts, film screenings, galleries, and also have artists in residence and educational art programs, among other uses. Moving on, the residential building, the entire building wraps around a central terrace over the first floor. On the western side of the building is a rooftop greenhouse. On the ground floor of this portion, there will be a fitness center for the residents and also bike storage. There's an underground parking garage which will be accessed through a curb cut along 162nd Street. There will be 36 underground car parking spaces and around 130 bicycle parking spaces on the ground floor. The building goes up to 8 stories and then goes up to 12 stories along at Elton Avenue. This portion of the building will have retail use on the ground floor, which will be 17 feet in height, which is almost a double height story. Along where the sewer easement is, there will be a landscaped open space. This open space will be used for accessing the retail use, for general use by the public, and also for programs related to the Bronx Music Heritage Center. This includes a description of the building, recapping the actions required. First is the disposition of city-owned property, UDAP designation, and project approval. And second is the special permit pursuant to 74-681 to allow development over a railroad right-of-way. The findings associated with the special permit include ensuring that the streets providing access to all the users are adequate to handle traffic resulting from them. Secondly, the distribution of floor area and the number of dwelling units does not adversely affect the character of the surrounding area. Thirdly, all uses do not adversely affect one another. And lastly, that if such railroad or transit right-of-way is deemed appropriate for future transportation use, the development does not preclude future use. The railroad right-of-way, as I mentioned before, has been abandoned and has not been used for more than a decade. In addition, a mayoral zoning override was granted for this site to address some of the bulk issues. Thank you. Yes.
Just Michelle.
Any questions?
Sorry.
Starting with Ms. Davis. Sorry
I
over
always
there.
seem to have a question. Hi, Danita, how are you? Thanks for the presentation. This seems like a very exciting project. I'm wondering if, just a couple different questions. I'm wondering if you have information and breakdown in terms of the bedroom sizes of the 277 units and the affordability levels. One comment about that's a good use of a sewer easement in terms of public open space. And then the third piece has to do with the lighting on the side of the building. I'm just wondering, I mean, I guess we'll hear about this, once it comes back. But I'm assuming those are residential units and whether or not that lighting might intrude into those residential units. If I'm reading that there's some light in the evening photos. Yeah, exactly. It's kind of cool. It's very cool looking. I like it, but I don't know what I want at my bedroom next to it. So anyway, those are my questions and comments.
Sure. So starting with the first one, in terms of the unit distribution, there will be studio 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. There will be 31 studio units, 45 one-bedrooms, 192 two-bedrooms, and 9 three-bedrooms, for a total of 277, one of which is a super unit. In terms of the affordability level, it'll range from 40 to 80% of AMI. We don't have the distribution of units as of now because it's going to be developed in the coming future. And related to the lighting, I will get back to you regarding what the means of the lighting is and what exactly those features are.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sean.
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
So this is a lot of fun for me to see these projects evolve over time. And I think I may be misremembering this, but I feel like when Site C came through, I asked about, there was a open space there was some discussion of open space having active recreation that was supposed to be adjacent to these sites. And I think at the time, the comment was that somehow would be part of the conversation when this site came through. And I'm wondering, what is the status of the open space piece?
So the open spaces between the two sites, this is the only open space associated, which is publicly accessible, the one on the corner here. This little triangle is a park, existing city park, which has trees. It's not fenced, and this will overlook this publicly accessible but open space, which will be maintained by the developer. In terms of the use, it'll be passive. This is providing access to the retail, the residential, the Music Heritage Center, and it'll have program space for which could be used by the Music Heritage Center. And the renderings show an amphitheater-like feature, but I don't believe it's been completely designed yet.
So I'm thinking back to when HPD RFP'd this thing in 2008 or 9 or whenever it was, and I think at the time there was HPD-owned land where the idea was that that land would be conveyed to parks for an active recreation site that would go along with these 3 developments, and I would just like to know what happened with that. I mean, it may very well not be there anymore. And then just again thinking back to Site C, I do sort of note that I asked my usual energy question, and the answer that came back was that one of the answers that sort of stuck in my mind was that Site C intends to have a heating index of 4. So that's I'm just hanging it out there as a challenge because that sounds like that would be a really, the typical residential affordable housing building is somewhere in the low teens, so like, 10, 11, 12, 13 range. So I'm just saying the other ones that they were going to get 4.
Okay, so, all right, in terms of the open space, I believe you're referring to the one adjacent on the west side, which constitutes the rest of the block. This is designated as a public open space in the urban renewal plan. It's not been conveyed to the Department of Parks yet for a park, but that is the intent for the future. So in terms of, that's the current status regarding the open space, based upon the Parks Department capital plan. It's not currently in their budget, but the intention is that in the future it'll be handed over to them.
HPD is in the audience, and I'm sure, we can get a response, when it comes back.
Ms. Levin.
Thank you. Well, that's a perfect segue to the question I had, which is about the open space that's shown on the plan adjacent to the site you just indicated as a possible future park. How will that open space function? Has it been designed? Will it be publicly accessible? And finally, that means that we have a permanently exposed building wall. And what will the treatment of that wall be so that it looks nice and not awful?
So the
lights over there.
The public open space has not been designed, the one that will be on the remainder of the site. However, this particular site, Site B, includes a portion of that.
Yeah, that's the part I'm asking about.
This here.
Yes.
So that's the rendering right there, isn't it?
Right. Let me show you an elevation. The ground floor of along the park's edge, the future park's edge would be the ground floor of the retail, the back of the retail. So there are no windows on the ground, the first two, practically for the first 2 stories. So you wouldn't be looking into windows on that side. But above, there'll be windows above.
So on the western elevation, there are windows going up and a nice treatment so that it's not just bare concrete.
They're looking at the sunset.
Let me get the elevation. That's the elevation.
Okay, good, thank you. But so the open space that's shown on the board that's on the floor, the open space that's shown right there, yep, that.
In the future.
Is that part of the future park?
Yes.
Even though it looks like it's part of the development
Yes.
site? Because there's a line drawn that's shown.
Right.
So is that legally required open space for this project that will then get absorbed into the park?
It's not legally required for this property, but it's just that the zoning lot was defined to include a part of that open space. But this will be designed along with the rest of the.
It's part of the park?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Efron.
I have really just a hope that when this comes back before us, we'll have a better sense of the Bronx music heritage, financial capability, who they are, and what the plan is if for some reason they aren't successful, because that's a lot of space, even exterior space, to program. It's a beautiful rendering, but that would require enormous resources to actually do that, and in its stead, you wouldn't want that space to become a park for skateboarders, which looks sort of ideal for what it is. So just to have a better sense of, in fact, the entity, whether it's a leasing space, whether it owns its space, what its capacity is, and what the alternative is if that doesn't come through. It's a fabulous, exciting idea to have the Black Box Theater, but let's hope that it actually is utilized by community members in the Bronx.
Yeah.
Ms. Ortiz.
Hi.
Hi.
Good morning. You have some questions related to the ground floor retail space.
Where is the nearest ground floor retail in the vicinity? It's a little hard to tell. Is this an isolated? Okay, would you just show that?
So the retail on this site is located here. There's a future retail across the street, a 45,000 square foot retail space. The grocery store. There's retail across the street on Rico Village, and there's additional retail on Street.
Okay, and I assume it's all, with the exception of the anticipated grocery store across the street, the balance is filled at this time?
It's mostly filled. There's, I think, one vacancy here in Rico Village, but other than that, it's filled.
Okay, and it's all sort of convenience retail, things that are needed in the community?
In terms of what's
Sort of.
proposed for the site?
Well, we're just talking about dry cleaners, coffee,
Right.
I don't know, grocery.
Right.
So what kinds of uses are anticipated within the 26,700 square feet?
Sure. So Vetco did some research on what would be appropriate uses. They did a market study to assess what are the gaps. They did a community survey, and then also had public visioning meetings to assess what the needs would be. So they've narrowed down to 3 uses: a restaurant, a bank, and daycare. So they're marketing them to these 3 different users. It could be, so it's not exactly final if it'll be 2 of these or all 3, which we can discuss, as the project goes forward. They've started marketing these. So the survey and the research identified a need for specialty foods, a gap in a need for restaurants. And the community survey, apart from the market, there was more than 50% of the residents said that they don't have daycare when they need it, whereas it's needed. And also there was an emergent need for banks in this area.
Okay, so are they anticipating being able to subdivide the space? Because 26,000 square
Right.
feet is much larger than any of those
Yes,
individual
yes.
uses.
So how they've designed this, it's very flexible and open. So the ground floor could potentially be divided, and there are multiple entrances. So the space could be divided up. Let me look.
So another issue with restaurants is anticipating ventilation, and if they want that use, ensuring that that's incorporated within the building, or within,
Sure.
ventilation is offered for that space.
Yes. So in terms of, I believe if they are able to identify the users, by the time the building is constructed, the ventilation could be accommodated in the building as they build it. It will be 17 feet floor to ceiling. So that some of the height could potentially be used, or other mechanisms to integrate that ventilation need in the building structure when it's constructed.
Okay, and the other thing is the loading and unloading associated with, I see
Right.
one.
There's one loading.
Okay, which is, okay, thank you.
Mr. Moran.
Hi, Benita. More of a comment than a question. I'm very happy to hear that this is not going to be another market, because right across the street, we know Presida is building a market there. The fact that they're thinking about banks and daycare is actually excellent, as well as restaurant. The only thing that I would have to say is, if in fact it's going to be a restaurant, it's imperative that to make that decision now, because the ventilation will need to go to the entire building.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're going to create an appendage after this beautiful building gets built to run a pipe upside of a building, which looks nasty. But I just want to commend the Bronx office, and specifically on this Melrose Commons plan that is coming to an end. The neighborhood is absolutely beautiful, and it shows by the neighboring neighbors who are actually beautifying their properties. They're making sure to build where there's the missing teeth. So I just want to put it out there that this is a plan long in the making. It's I think more than 20 years, and it actually is coming to an end, and the community looks beautiful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions? And Vanita, thank you also. I just note that we have had, particularly to HPD, we have had extensive discussions here about the opportunities for daycare centers and the desirability of actually moving daycare centers from inadequate spaces to new spaces that are specifically designed for daycare centers. And this would seem to me to be an ideal spot, and HPD should be in touch with DCAS and ACS to assure, to Commissioner Ortiz's point, that at least some of this space would be perfectly appropriate for a daycare center, which in fact might not require a subsidy, but rather could help subsidize this underlying development. So, and with that, the project is certified.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's now move to item number 8 and 9. The presentation will be a joint one. These actions involve acquisition and site selection for the NYPD evidence storage and central records, as well as the New York County District Attorney's Office for storage, for space within a building located at 4312 2nd Avenue in Sunset Park, Brooklyn. Now, our presenter is Jonah for the Brooklyn office, so we're going to, he's going to jointly present items number 8 and 9, uses to be located within the same building at 4312 2nd Avenue. Page 262 and 278.
Joint present?
Yeah.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the Commission. Can you hear me? The following, as Jackie mentioned, the following site selection and acquisition applications are running concurrently and being presented together because both the existing and proposed facilities are located in the same building at 4312 2nd Avenue in the Sunset Park neighborhood of Brooklyn, Community District 7. In the first application, the New York City Police Department, NYPD, and the Department of Citywide Administrative Services, DCAS, are seeking a site selection and acquisition to facilitate the lease of approximately 78,000 square feet on the 6th floor of the building, and then an additional 15,000 square feet on the 1st floor. In the second application, the District Attorney's Office of New York County, the DA of New York, and DCAS are also seeking a site selection and acquisition to facilitate the lease of approximately 73,000 square feet on the 5th floor and an additional 19,000 square feet on the 2nd floor. For both agencies, a central goal is to allow them to safely store case records, and specifically for the NYPD to store evidence records and general property obtained during regular operations. To the north and the south of the site, this is the site outlined in red. The land uses consist mainly of manufacturing and industrial uses. To the west of the site, along the waterfront, which is over here, they're a mix of transportation utility uses. And then to the east of the site, there's also a mix of industrial and commercial uses, as well as some non-conforming residential uses. In regards to the built character, the area is comprised of 1 to 6-story industrial and commercial buildings, open uses along the waterfront, and then clusters of 1 to 2 family homes. With respect to land uses, I'd just like to quickly note that the site is in the area of the Sunset Park 197A plan, which was adopted in 2009. In both applications, the proposed storage use was described as being consistent with one of the plan's 5 primary goals to preserve existing industrial and commercial uses east of 1st Avenue. To the area west of 2nd Avenue, including the location of the site, so you can see it's located in an M3 1 zoning district, which permits heavy industrial uses. east of 2nd Avenue is split between a M12 zoning district to the north, which permits lighter industrial uses, and then an M12D district to the south, which allows manufacturing uses as of right, and then residential development through authorization from the City Planning Commission. 3rd Avenue and also runs along the Gowanus Expressway above, serves as a border separating the manufacturing uses to the west and then residential uses to the east. And then with respect to public transit, the area is served by the N and R subway lines which are along 4th Avenue, and then the B35, B37, B63, and B70 bus routes. As you can see in the pictures, the building at 4312 2nd Avenue is 6 stories, occupies an entire tax block with a total of 581,000 square feet of floor area. The building contains a variety of storage uses. The city's Board of Elections occupies the 3rd and 4th floors for the storage of voting machines, which is part of a site selection and acquisition action approved by the City Planning Commission in 2009. Currently, under temporary license agreements, the District Attorney of New York County occupies the 5th floor, and the NYPD occupies the 6th floor. Aside from these facilities, the rest of the building is vacant. For the action related to the NYPD, the applicants are seeking a combined site selection acquisition in order to enter into a lease agreement to continue occupying the entire 6th floor, and then to expand to a portion of the 1st floor for office use. During Hurricane Sandy, 2 NYPD storage facilities were flooded, which led them to relocate its proposed its storage files to this site. The applicants also indicate that the site is appropriate due to the building's abundance of space, its accessible location, and its close proximity to 2 major police precincts. Further, I'd just like to note that the site was included in the 2013-2014 citywide statement of needs as part of a long-term plan to relocate and consolidate evidence and record storage citywide. For the action related to the District Attorney's Office of New York County, the applicants also seek a combined site selection and acquisition in order to enter into a lease agreement to continue occupying the 5th floor and then expand to a portion of the 2nd floor. As one of the most active DA offices in the entire country, the expansion is expected to help manage the large influx and volume of case files processed each week, while being in a location that they described as being accessible due to the Gowanus Expressway. And the floor is occupied by both the NYPD and DA's office. Investments in security systems are being made to protect the storage material. Lastly, in regards to flood risk, it should be noted that the most recent firm maps show that the 500-year floodplain encroaches on a small portion of the site's northwestern edge. It's right over here. However, this area is neither proposed or existing to be occupied by the NYPD or the DA's office. As another form of flood protection, the building's 1st floor is elevated to the height of a loading dock, which is approximately 4 feet above curb level. And then finally, for the Commission's reference, the full fair share analysis is enclosed in the briefing package. And that concludes my presentations, and I welcome any questions. Thank you.
Questions for Jonah? Mr. Dweck.
Question. Do you know the term of the lease?
That hasn't been...
Or the proposed term of the lease?
It's proposed to be negotiated between DCAS and NYPD.
Is it a long-term lease, or is this just a temporary fix till the city and the police department can come up with a better records or DNA retention facility?
It's supposed to be, I think the NYPD is still evaluating that in DCAS, so I'd just defer to them.
My concern is that, I mean, on a temporary basis, certainly buildings empty, the space empty. My concern is that this is in IBZ, and we would hope to find a more industrious use of the space than storage, which is not going to create many jobs, I should say. Certainly, the facility is needed, so I understand that as a short-term fix, especially post-Hurricane Sandy. But looking to the future, we should really ask NYPD to, and the district attorney's office to plan out, or some kind of comprehensive strategy for all the agencies that might need these kind of facilities, maybe where it could be weather controlled or whatever else it might be that,
Yeah.
That's my comments on the matter.
Thank you.
Ms. Efron.
I just want to build on Commissioner Dweck. I had a hard time understanding whether it was a long-term or an interim use because twice the word long-term is used and twice the word interim use is used. So it would be helpful to know how long a lease it is, particularly because that would mean that this building has more than 300,000 square feet of really dead storage space with what seems to be a maximum of 12 to 15 people, employed. And this site, as I understand it from a quick look on Google, was the Commodore Christmas ornament company that recently moved its manufacturing overseas but employed several hundred people. And in an interview with The Real Deal, the owner of the building said they were very interested in building out on the investments others had made in the neighborhood around what he called hip uses, things like the film industry, ad agencies, and high-tech manufacturers for long-term lease. So I'm just wondering, there seems to be an inconsistency between the use that's being proposed and maybe even what economic development actions are taking place in the neighborhood. So if there's any way to know whether there's any leverage of private sector investment, particularly in Industry City, which is referenced in the report, and maybe other building owners in that neighborhood, it just seems some more integrated planning might be useful.
And I just want to provide a very minor clarification that in the application does state that it's for the NYPD, it's more of an interim issue while they evaluate other facilities. They did mention 10 years as an option, but I think that DCAS they have to determine that as part of their purview in negotiating the lease.
We'll get some additional information.
Great.
Yep.
Ms. Ortiz.
One question, there was mention that only a portion of the ground floor would be used for storage. Could you indicate which portion and which corner?
It would be this is the rear of the site, or the area along First Avenue. But
It would be the area along, or it would not?
It would not be.
Okay, so it'd be located furthest from the water, because it's 600 feet at its closest point to the waterfront.
That's, I have to check the exact length, but the entire there's no basement in the building, and it's elevated to a loading dock height. I'd have to confirm the exact location of but my understanding is that it would be over here, which is where the entrance is located.
Okay.
We'll get back to you on the exact
Okay.
location.
Thank you.
Ms. Delausse, then Ms. Efron.
Just more of a comment. I mean, knowing the 700 Columbia Street and knowing how flooded that got after Sandy, I'm glad to know that everything we're talking about here is either on the second or the fifth floor, because this is obviously within the flood zone as well. Thanks.
Ms. Efron.
I just had a question. You said that it matched the 197A plan of the neighborhood, but I went through all 5 of the specific new connections, new opportunities, Sunset Park primary goals, and with the exception of preserving industrial, commercial, and residential uses in fabric in the area east of First Avenue, which really is a blanket statement because short of a hospital or a recycling facility, there's really no other use there. I just have a hard time seeing how it's at all consistent with it. This is about job creation, this is about waterfront access, it's about rich maritime and industrial heritage, and this is the potential loss of space for several hundred employees potentially, and it just seems completely inconsistent with the neighborhood's 197A plan.
Okay. And I would just add that it took the community 13 years to complete the 197A plan. And that's just to say that it took a long time to develop that level of consensus.
And what's the argument that it's that it is consistent with the 197A plan?
The argument is that I've also read through the plan, is that there's a balance of a need to promote and retain industrial uses, but at the same time preserve the use and the scale of existing commercial, the mix of industrial, commercial, and residential uses east of First Avenue. So I can check with the applicants to find out some more information. Yep.
Any other questions for Jonah? If not, certified. This will be an interesting one when it comes back.
Absolutely.
Commissioners, let's now move to item number 10, page 296. It's a Brooklyn pre-hearing application with respect to an urban development action area project designation, project approval, and disposition of city-owned property to facilitate 20 affordable housing units on 3 sites along Pacific Street. Our presenter is Connie from the Brooklyn office. We're on item number 10, page 296.
Good afternoon, Chairman Riserod, Commissioners. This is an application by the New York City Department of Housing Preservation and Development for Urban Development Action Area Project Designation, project approval, and disposition to facilitate the development of 20 units of affordable housing over 3 sites in Brownsville, Brooklyn, which is in Community District Number 16. As you may recall, the proposed development site consists of 3 city-owned vacant sites located on Pacific Street between Howard and Saratoga Avenues in an R6 zoning district. Land uses in the surrounding area are predominantly residential. There are a mix of residential, commercial, and industrial uses, as well as public facilities north of the project area along Atlantic Avenue and east of the project area along Saratoga Avenue. Public transportation in the surrounding area includes the B7, the B47, the B63, as well as the B25 bus. The proposed development is known as Pacific Street Apartments, and this will consist of the new construction of 3 4-story walk-up buildings with a combined total of 20 residential units. These units will be a mix of 1, 2, and 3-bedroom apartments. All of the units will be affordable to households with incomes up to 60% of the area median income. And all 3 buildings will be developed and operated by the Mutual Housing Association of New York. To facilitate this project to provide 20 units of affordable housing, the applicant requested Urban Development Action Area Project Designation, project approval, and disposition of city-owned property. Community Board 16 voted to recommend approval of this application. 26 voted in favor, 0 voted against, and there were 0 abstentions. The Brooklyn Borough President recommended to approve the application with 4 conditions. The first condition is that the housing units be permanently affordable. The second condition is that the disposition not be delayed in efforts to have these units designated as homeownership in lieu of being rental. Just a quick note of background about that. The borough president held a public hearing on February 9th for this project. And at that public hearing, the council member Darlene Mealy spoke against the project because it was an affordable rental project, stating that she preferred it to be a homeownership project. The third condition is that the existing trees that are being cleared on the development site be processed and sustainably disposed of. So, for example, that they be mulched and used potentially on site in the side yard or in a green thumb garden or in another city park. The fourth condition is that the developer, which is, again, the Mutual Housing Association of New York, be required to retain Brooklyn-based contractors and subcontractors, especially those that are designated as locally based enterprises, known as LBEs, and women and minority-owned business enterprises, known as MWBEs. So that's to meet the standards for Local Law 1, to meet or exceed the standards for Local Law 1. In addition, they want them to coordinate monitoring the level of participation of LBEs and MWBEs with a monitoring agency.
Thank you, Connie. Questions? Very clear? Oh, I'm sorry, not so
Yeah,
clear.
sorry. No, it was clear.
Ms. Delos.
You said this is an R6, right?
It's in an R6 zoning district. That's correct.
Okay. And I think it's pretty extraordinary to note the AMI bands that are proposed here, starting at 25% of AMI and going up to 58% of AMI. That's a very broad and low range, which I think is representative of the local community, and I think is more in keeping, obviously, with affordable rental than affordable homeownership. It would be pretty challenging, although I appreciate the council members' concerns and desires, we wouldn't reach the same level of affordability in a homeownership project. But I guess we'll hear more on Wednesday.
Great presentation.
Any other questions for Connie? Thank you. Public hearing Wednesday.
Connie also has the next item, item number 11, page 326, proposed urban development action area project designation, project approval, and disposition of city-owned property to facilitate 10 units of affordable housing in the East New York Community District of Brooklyn. This is also a Brooklyn for hearing application. We're on item number 11, page 326.
This is an application by the New York City Department of Housing Preservation and Development for Urban Development Action Area Project Designation, project approval, and disposition to facilitate the development of 10 units of affordable housing in East New York, Brooklyn, in Community District Number 5. And just a note that this project is being developed concurrently with the Pacific Street Apartments. The proposed development site consists of 3 city-owned vacant lots located on Linwood Street between Blake and Dumont Avenues in an R5 zoning district. Land uses in the surrounding area are predominantly residential. Retail businesses are located 2 blocks south of the project area along New Lots Avenue. Public transportation in the surrounding area includes the number 3 and the C subway lines, as well as the B15 bus. The proposed project, called Linwood Street Apartments, will consist of the new construction of 1 4-story walk-up building with a total of 10 residential units. These units will include 1 and 2-bedroom apartments. All of the units will be affordable to households with incomes up to 60% of the area median income. And this building will be developed and operated by the Mutual Housing Association of New York. To facilitate this project, to provide 10 units of affordable housing, the applicant requested Urban Development Action Area project designation, project approval, and disposition of city-owned property. Community Board 5 did not hold a public hearing or issue a recommendation on this application. The Brooklyn Borough President recommended to approve the application with the following conditions to be incorporated into the regulatory agreement or the land disposition agreement. The first condition is that the housing units be permanently affordable. The second condition is that street trees be planted and maintained on the Linwood Street sidewalk. The third condition is that the existing trees being cleared on the development site be processed and sustainably disposed of, again, perhaps mulched and used on site, in a side yard, in a green thumb park, garden, or in a city park. And the fourth condition is that the developer be required to retain Brooklyn-based contractors and subcontractors, especially those designated as LBEs or MWBEs, in order to meet or exceed the standards for Local Law 1, as well as coordinating the monitoring of the level of participation with the monitoring agency.
Questions? Ms. Zhang?
I will struggle to make this a question. These projects, I think both of them, I can't like laser map in my brain like exactly where these things are relative to like, electric subnets and what subnetworks and what have you, but they look to me like they're in an area that has, where we've heard, spoken in media and public that there are, Con Ed has identified some particular these areas as being, in particular need of having efficient developments and energy efficiency improvements, and particularly sort of peak load management. And I'm just, of course, these are obviously preliminary drawings, what have you, but there are some features in here that call out to me as being perhaps not indicative of the most aggressive green building goals being incorporated in this project. Like, I see AC sleeves, for example, and things like this. And Manny, generally on their property management side, I believe has a reputation of operating the buildings very efficiently, but they, obviously the property operations folks can only do what they can do given like the building that they have in front of them. And so I would just be really curious as to whether the project has, or whether the architect and the engineers have considered sort of the broader context of where these buildings are going in and the particular need to be aggressive in this area, where cooling and things like that are concerned.
Yeah, so what I can speak to at this time is that, to my understanding, all new construction projects that are part of an HPD financing program are required to comply with the Enterprise Green Communities criteria. So that's kind of a certification akin to the LEED structure where certain energy efficiency measures or certain measures aren't dictated, but it's a point system where you can kind of pick certain measures and then you get a point score. So that is a certification that the applicant does intend to pursue, that the sponsor would pursue.
Well, they're required to do that, which is city policy. But I guess, there are certain instances when you would like to see projects sort of go above and beyond what's sort of been put down by the city as being the minimum. And I think that, because there are some particular needs in this particular area, and also because of the fact that this is new construction and these are small buildings where, you have an opportunity to be more aggressive within a more also aggressive, budget. I just think that it would be a missed opportunity if they weren't considering sort of more aggressive goals.
I can ask the applicant to speak to that. One other note is that the borough president also kind of urged the applicant to kind of look into kind of exceeding the requirements that would be applicable under Enterprise Green. And so, for example, they encouraged them to look into solar panels on the roof. And obviously that would come with an additional cost, and they encourage them to kind of, explore different options, including RESOA funding. So they are looking into the possibility of solar planted roofs, which may or may not impact these projects, but would impact other projects forthcoming in their portfolio.
And then I will totally stop. So in the One City Built to Last report, for example, there was a case study that was called out that was affordable housing. And these are, bigger buildings than these will be, but these were some of the first multifamily passive house buildings that were built in the country, obviously in the city as well, but, some of the first ones, anywhere in the US. And that's a much, much more aggressive, it has much more aggressive energy goals built into it than, what the baseline of the HPD's green policy would call for. And so, and the state has also sort of made motions about the fact that they would like to see low-income residential construction head towards more aggressive goals there. So, thank you.
Thank you.
The applicant will be here to answer.
So noted.
Give her a reprise on Wednesday. Any other questions for Connie? Thanks, Connie.
Thank you.
Commissioners, item number 12 has been laid over. We do not anticipate any speakers on the proposed acquisition for the continued use of this Early Life Center daycare center. We will continue that hearing to April 22nd. The next item is item number 13, page 357, proposed special permit to facilitate a single-family residence at 20 East 71st Street. And our presenter is Stephen. We're on page 357.
Good afternoon again.
Welcome back, Stephen.
Thank you. This is a private application by Tower Management Holdings, LLC, for the property located at 20 East 71st Street for a special permit pursuant to zoning resolution section 74-711, landmark preservation in all districts, to allow the renovation and conversion of a building back to its original use as a single-family home. As part of the 74-711, the applicant seeks 3 waivers. The first is requirements for a minimum distance of 30 feet between the rear lot line and legal windows in the building. Second, requirements for a minimum inner court dimension of 30 feet, and finally, for a minimum inner court area of 1,200 square feet. Now, the building is located in Community District 8 in the Upper East Side Historic District within the Special Madison Avenue Preservation District. The project was certified on January 20th of 2014 and is coming back for a pre-hearing review. I'll take you through an abbreviated review of the project and then proceed to the Community Board and Borough President recommendations. As you can see on the area map, the project site is located on East 71st Street between Madison and 5th Avenue within a C51 zoning district. The C51 permits a commercial FAR of 4 and a residential and community facility FAR of 10. Permitted uses in the C51 zoning district are residential community facility uses, hotels, and use group 6, which is other commercial uses. Bordering to the west and to the east of the C51 is an R8B in the mid-blocks along the east side of 5th and along Park Avenue, and a portion of East 72nd Street is an R10 district with a maximum permitted FAR of 10. The buildings adjacent to the project site and across the street are 5- and 6-story townhouses that were generally built in the early 1900s. While some of these townhouses have remained single-family residences, a number of them have been converted into multi-family apartments, and there's larger 12 to 20-story buildings along the avenues. There are a number of landmark buildings in the area, notably the Frick Collection, which is right here, this blue, and St. James Church, which is across the intersection there. Can we go to the site plan? So the building is located 25 feet from Madison Avenue on the south side of East 71st Street. The building is on a zoning lot which has 45 feet of frontage and a depth of 100 feet, 100.42 feet, for a total lot area of 4,519 square feet. The building contains a total of 16,738 zoning floor area. With a floor area ratio of 3.7, the building is 5 stories with a cellar and a subcellar. As you can see on the photo board, the far photo is when the building was built. Shortly, sometime in 1923, and then next to it is the building today as it stands. It was commissioned as a single-family residence. In 1942, the building was sold to the Archdiocese of New York, who converted the building into a multiple dwelling for the Catholic Center for the Blind, which included kitchen, dormitories, infirmaries, bedrooms, bathrooms, etc. The Archdiocese sold the site in 1979. It is unclear how the building was being used over the next few years, but 1986 C of O lists the building as being entirely occupied by Use Group 6 offices. The building has been vacant since 2007 and was sold to the applicant in 2012, who purchased the building intending to restore it for use as a personal residence. The rear wall of the building is in the third picture on the side. It's original. The windows are original. The location of the windows and the size of the windows are all original, but the back, you can see the snowy area is a one-story solarium. That is not original. It was most likely built without permits and extends from the rear facade into the inner court area. The solarium will be removed. The building has not otherwise been expanded. So the applicant is proposing to convert the building to its original use as a single-family residence, which is prohibited because it would create a non-compliance. So they're requesting a special permit to waive the following sections. Section 23861, requiring a minimum distance of 30 feet to the lot line for legal windows, and Section 23851, minimum inner court dimension of 30 feet and minimum inner court area of 1,200 square feet. As you can see from the waiver, the distance from the rear facade of the building to the rear lot line is 12 feet. This area here, and you can see it here, 11 feet, 11 inches. That's the rear lot line. This is all living area. It's the original building. The proposed conversion would include restoration and repair of the exterior of the building and include certain interior alterations. LPC is supportive of the modification of use in bulk and the removal of the solarium and of the restoration and repair work to the building. There's no change to the building's existing floor area or envelope. So moving on to the Community Board and BP review on February 11th, 2015, Manhattan Community Board 8 approved the application with a vote of 27 in favor, 0 opposed, and 1 abstention. And in a letter dated March 17th, 2015, the Borough President also approved the application.
Thank you, Stephen. Who's going to be here to represent the applicant on Wednesday?
The lawyers for the representative of the applicant's not expected to come, but the architects will also be there.
I wouldn't expect the applicant to be here. Questions for Stephen? Hearing none. Thank you.
Let's now move to item number 14, page 393. It's Manhattan pre-hearing application with respect to a zoning text amendment to facilitate the transfer of residential floor area. Our presenter is Jamie. This is returning from Community Board and Borough President Review. Item number 14, page 393.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This is a private application for a text amendment to the Special West Chelsea District. The proposed change would apply to Section 98-33B. It would allow granting sites in commercial districts not located inside a designated sub-area to transfer their residential FAR to receiving sites. Currently, the text permits only commercial FAR to be transferred off of granting sites in C62A and C63A districts. In these districts, permitted residential FAR is higher than permitted commercial FAR, and so the proposed text would allow the transfer to tap into the excess residential floor area. Special West Chelsea District was created in 2005 to facilitate the preservation and conversion of the High Line into a park and to enhance the gallery district and encourage new residential and commercial growth appropriate to the neighborhood. The High Line Transfer Corridor was established as part of this special district. It permitted the transfer of floor area from granting sites within the corridor to eligible receiving sites outside of the corridor. The corridor is intended to preserve light, air, and views along the High Line and to ensure that the development rights under the High Line can be utilized. FAR transferred from the corridor can be utilized by receiving sites as bonus FAR in 9 sub-areas A through J. And these sub-areas have special provisions related to base FAR and bonus FAR, as well as height and setback regulations. In addition to getting bonus FAR from the transfer, properties can also increase their bonus by participating in the inclusionary housing program. In 2012, the special district was expanded to create sub-area J, which is the Chelsea Market, and also in January, CPC approved the DCP-initiated proposal to further expand the district south to West 14th Street. The sites subject to the proposed text amendment are lots within the Highland Transfer Corridor north and south of West 23rd Street. The surrounding areas are represented by a variety of building types and uses reflecting West Chelsea's dynamic character. To the northwest, there are loft and warehouse buildings that have been preserved by the West Chelsea Special Historic District, and these mainly contain retail and office uses. To the southeast is the it's the Chelsea Historic District and its extension, comprised primarily of lower scale residential buildings of 4 to 5 stories. It's generally residential east of 10th Avenue, with NYCHA housing to the north and the London Terrace Gardens immediately to the east. And residential continues down 23rd Street towards the water on the north side with newer 13 to 14 story residential buildings. And on the south side are storage and parking uses. There are 7 tax lots to which the proposed text change would apply. The applicant owns 1 property, block 694, lot 40, south of 23rd Street. The site is currently tenanted by FDNY as an EMS station and is with a 5-year lease that it's going to expire this year. And there was a ULURP for site selection and acquisition in 2012 to facilitate a permanent facility, but no immediate plans exist to develop a site. There are active negotiations that are underway to extend the lease. So the Highline Transfer Corridor runs through sub-areas A, B, and E. In sub-areas A, B, and E, the max commercial FAR and max residential FARs are the same. and they can be transferred off to receiving sites. The transfer corridor also covers areas that are not in sub-areas, and the transfer from granting sites in these portions are enabled by the zoning text, section 9833B, which currently allows only max FARs permitted for commercial use to be eligible for transfer. So granting sites that are outside of sub-areas and within the M15 districts, they can transfer a max of 5.0 FAR, which is commercial, and no residential is allowed in these districts. However, granting sites outside of the sub-areas and within C62A and C63A's commercial districts, they can transfer their max commercial FARs only. However, in these districts, the as-of-right residential FARs are slightly higher than the commercial FARs, but the zoning does not allow the residential FARs to be moved off. C62A has a 6.0 commercial FAR and a 6.02 residential FAR, and C63A has a 6.0 commercial FAR and 7.52 residential FAR. So this proposed action would permit the transfer to increase by 0.02 and 1.52 FAR respectively. And for the applicant, it would generate approximately 8,668 additional square feet that he could transfer off to a receiving site, and providing potentially 16 extra units in the receiving site. On March 16th, we received favorable recommendation letters from BP and CB4 with 3 conditions. The first condition was that both the Community Board 4 and BP, they wanted city planning to confirm that this change actually conforms with the original intent of the creation of West Chelsea Special District. And secondly, they wanted to confirm that the proposed change would affect only 2 properties in West Chelsea. And thirdly, that they wanted to city planning to draft additional language that would limit the max FAR that can be transferred off to the as of right that was existing at the creation of West Chelsea Special District. For the first condition, I think city planning we can confirm that this was this is consistent with the intention. And then secondly, that we've learned since the referral that only the site that's south, which is under the applicant's control, would be able to take advantage of this additional FAR or this kind of additional availability, because the northern site, they have already sort of moved off all of their FAR, so they won't be able to tap into that. So really, this text amendment only applies to this one site that's under the applicant's control. And thirdly, the CB4 wanted to assure that basically in case of the future rezoning, that the floor area that is to be able to be moved off will not also be increased. And I believe that, in the case of the future rezoning, that there would be a full ULURP process. And so I think, the department's position is that, we would, when that comes, then, there will be an opportunity for a full review of that. So it's really not, we don't really want to kind of speak to that and limit any future FAR transfers.
Thanks, Jamie. Questions? No questions? Congratulations.
Thanks, Jamie. So let's now just move to the votes for April 1st, this coming Wednesday. Staff have prepared favorable resolutions for your consideration. That includes actions associated with the New Roads Plaza in the Bronx, as well as Walton Avenue in the Bronx, which will facilitate affordable housing. We also have the Charles R. Drew Early Learning Center and Theodore Jackson Senior Center, Special South Richmond certification from 1 to 3 zoning lots to facilitate residential development on Jefferson Boulevard in Staten Island. And we have on Henderson Avenue a special special hillsides preservation authorization to facilitate a single-family home. And on Arbutus Avenue, we have the special South Richmond certification to facilitate 2 single-family homes. In a couple of weeks, April 22nd, we will have the West 21st Street parking garage. I'm going to kind of fast forward through the other actions. We received a letter from the applicant with respect to some of the elements of that particular proposal, where Richard will walk us through. But also on April 22nd, we have a series of SNAD authorizations at 15 Windy Hollow, 30 East Loop Road, 46 East Loop Road, and 62 East Loop Road to facilitate cabanas, patios, and single-family homes. So,
Hi. So in response to some questions that came up at the public hearing on Wednesday, also in response to some of the concerns that are brought up by the Borough President in a recommendation, the applicant has responded in a letter with attachments relating to, one, the confirmation that they will post the rates for bicycle parking on the signage for the public parking garage, and two, that they could put the 5 required bicycle parking spaces on the ground floor level. In the certified version of the plans, this is the ground floor plan and this is the cellar level plan. The bicycle spaces were proposed to be on the 2 columns down here. Again, they would be fully attended, so a bicyclist can come in, stop here, the attendant's booth here, the attendant would come out, take that bike down on the elevator, hang him up, and it would be covered and protected. The applicant in the attached letter and the drawing shows that they could accommodate those 5 bicycle spaces on the green wall back here, hanging next to the elevator. They think this is the most appropriate site that they can locate them. This would allow those spaces to be visible from the attendance booth and to monitor them throughout the day. I should note that this area is uncovered because of the required 30-foot rear yard here. The second floor basically comes like this. It follows that. So this area is going to be uncovered, so those bicycles would be exposed to the elements. If the commission thinks it's appropriate to make this change and to relocate those 5 bicycle spaces, then the drawings would have to be revised, and that can be done before the vote date.
Questions for Richard? And you saw the applicant's letter, so they're open to, shall we say, to the views of the commission on this. Ms. Levin.
Well, I guess as the one who raised the question, I'm nudged by the borough president of the community board. I guess the community board didn't raise it. And being a bike rider myself, the challenge, we have this funny situation with the zoning text that requires bike parking in garages. It was born of a very good desire to encourage the use of bicycles in these kinds of facilities. The reality is that garage operators have made it so difficult or so expensive that no bike rider in their right mind would think about using it. But I think I think the borough president is actually right. I didn't think when they first got onto this track that they were picking away at something that was, in the big scheme of things, all that important. But you know what? If we have these regulations on the books, we ought to make them as usable as possible. And I think this is a small number of bikes. I think having the bike parking available on the ground floor so that a user doesn't, if they will fit there, so the user doesn't have to hang around where a grumpy good attendant who doesn't know about dealing with bikes gets in the garage, gets in the elevator, goes down, finds the bike, I would vote for efficiency over aesthetics, and to me, it doesn't matter that the bike is outside. I think having it easily available is better. And I think it's also a good sort of public recognition that bike parking is important and here, and I'd put it upstairs.
Well, you've got 2 votes. And maybe more as people sort of contemplate it over the next week or 2. So,
Can I just ask a question about this? I'm just wondering, going back to the price piece, I think a big piece of it goes to the price. And I get when bike parking takes the space of a car, why they would price it accordingly, but this is a situation where no car was going to fit there anyway, and in many cases, no car is going to fit in a space that the operators are, I'm just indicating that perhaps it's something to be looked at through others about trying to price it in such a way that it's actually going to be used, especially if it's not really impacting on the operations of the garage. So I concur. Make it easy to get them.
So, Mr. Chairman, staff will be preparing a favorable report with that. Since we're anticipating voting it out on April 27th.
yeah, and I don't know if there's any other views, but I share the view of both commissioners that let's at the very least make it sort of user-friendly and with all due respect to the aesthetics, it's a garage.
Maybe a pretty garage. It's a garage.
Right.
And we can have the plans dated.
I believe that concludes all the items on the agenda.
Well, thank you all for a very long but interesting day, and we'll see you on Wednesday. And with that, we stand adjourned.